Hey there, friendlies. Today's show is sponsored by Love Justice International. Love Justice is a nonprofit organization that fights human trafficking by intercepting victims while they're being transported, but before they've been exploited. To date, they have intercepted over 22,000 people in multiple countries around the globe, including girls like Alina. Alina was just trying to provide for her family when she heard of an amazing job opportunity away from her home in a small village in South Asia. But when she arrived, her phone was taken away and she was forced into a brothel with no means of escape. She never agreed to this. She doesn't want it. She has not been broken, but soon will be. Every 60 seconds, about the time we'll take to talk about this, two people, like Alina, are trafficked. Every minute of every day, 365 days of the year, like clockwork. But what if someone was there to stop it before it happened? This is where Love Justice International comes in. They have strategically placed their teams in multiple countries around the world to intercept thousands of girls and boys just like Alina and prevent them from being trafficked into slavery. Folks, these guys are the real deal. I know firsthand, as I have very close personal connection to them. All started with 5 college buddies, one of which happened to be my little brother. They went to Nepal for 6 months after graduating with no plans other than to hang out, play some soccer in the streets, and get to know the kids of Kathmandu. One of them ended up staying behind to start what is now Love Justice International. That was 2002, and 18 years later, Love Justice is rescuing kids all throughout Africa and Asia. I can honestly say there's no fluff here. These folks are actually living on the ground in these countries, doing the work and getting astounding results. Not only preventing exploitation, but partnering with law enforcement to file cases, collect evidence, all of this to ensure that the assholes who are doing this are arrested and convicted. It's super easy to help out. They've gotten so efficient that even just a few bucks goes a long way. So please, if you would, take a minute and go check out what Love Justice is doing to stop human trafficking at lovejustice.ngo. Once again, that is lovejustice.ngo. Do it. My guest today is a multi-platinum Grammy and BMI award-winning writer and producer. He was a founding member of Evanescence and has been penning hits with and for artists for over a decade. Selling over 70 million records, his number one singles include My Immortal by Evanescence, Christina Perri's 1,000 Years, Because of You by Kelly Clarkson, Dear Hate with Maren Morris and Vince Gill, and See You Again by Carrie Underwood. He has had songs released by Keith Urban, Blink 182, 5 Seconds of Summer, Ben Rector, Kelsey Ballerini, Jason Mraz, and many more. He relocated from LA to Nashville in 2016, where he has continued his stellar track record of writing hit songs and discovering talented new artists. Folks, I am proud to call this guy one of my great friends and legitimately one of the best dudes on the planet. I'm extremely glad I met him when I did, and I'm confident in a past life we were bounding over snowy mountain bluffs in the same wolf pack together. We're actually still looking for something we legitimately disagree on, but I think we're going to find it today. I do. I feel it in my gut. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show today an Arkansas man of proud English heritage whose tolerance for bourbon well outlasts his tolerance for people, whose wavy brown movie star locks elicit the uncontrollable urge to rip open his button down in a desperate attempt to unveil a hidden emblazoned red S next to a tattoo of the House of L, whose boyish and youthful charm make one willing to wager he sold a piece of his soul to Apollo in exchange for an endless supply of ambrosia and nectar. A lefty whose left hook I look forward to catching across the chin in short order. The great and immensely powerful David Hodges.
Ooh, lovely. That's fantastic. It's not a coincidence. That actual bio, I have had my children memorize, and they speak it to me every morning when I wake up.
To affirm
the great and powerful.
Yeah. You have a throne in your room, and you go sit on it while your children gather at your feet.
No, because of Evanescence, I actually sleep in a coffin. But, but yes, the concept is there.
Oh my goodness.
And I shall rise this morning.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, man. Dude, thank you for being here.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, man.
And we probably could have actually just clipped this podcast together with multiple excerpts from our hangs at
I think that's true.
Never Never, Midnight Oil.
And the rest of them, yeah.
And the rest of them. But it's good to at least have you formally here at Never Never to talk a little bit.
I love the setup of it like this, too. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So you and Kate your wife, relocated along with all your lovely girls.
4 little girls. Yeah.
Relocated from LA about 2016?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
So you've had the opportunity to engage in music deeply in LA, and now you're 4 or 5 years into the Nashville experience. Two legendary towns for the music history, but obviously very different how they've gone about making music. So 5 years later, what's it like? Your Nashville.
I first started writing in Nashville in earnest. I think it was before the recession. I think it was like 2006. It was pretty early on, with me being a songwriter. And every time I would come to Nashville, I loved the approach and the process of how this town thinks about songwriting. There was never a session in LA where songwriters would come in and say, oh, okay, I've got these 4 titles. And they would just list off song titles and we'd write from there. And I don't know, most sessions in Nashville start that way. So already like the beginning of the process is so different. So I would come to Nashville every 2 months or so, and I'd have 5 sessions in 5 days. And I would come home to LA so energized by this process of just, they just think about songwriting and do it so differently. In LA, when I was working, if I worked 5 days and if I had 5 writing sessions in a row, I'd be exhausted by the end of the week. It was just proof of how different it was that I felt like I was a student kind of learning the Nashville way. And as time went on, Kate and I think realized pretty early on that eventually we'd end up in Nashville. The question was going to be when, and the when had to do with a bunch of different factors: how old our kids are, how old our parents are. Our parents all still live back in Arkansas, so kind of wanting to be able for our kids to interact with their grandparents. But a big piece of it for me too was like this progression that Nashville is having, maybe not in the way that it tells stories, but in the genres that it's spreading out to. Country music isn't really a genre that I grew up listening to a ton. It wasn't really what got me into music, although I have a great appreciation. I think some of the best country music that's out is the best music that there is. Some of the worst of it's terrible, but that's kind of true with every genre. I feel like every genre of music, you can find really bad versions of it. But a great country song is a pretty special and beautiful and uniquely American thing, which I really loved. So it eventually came to a point that as I was coming to town every couple of months, seeing new cranes up, new restaurants opening, new pop artists coming into town to spend a week or two writing, it felt like around 2016, it's like, oh, okay, I think I could fill up a month's worth of a calendar working on shit that I really love here. Because before that, I was like, I know I can do a week every 2 months, but could I really space it out to a full thing? And when I started to feel like that was possible, that was right around 2016. And I've been really shocked moving here how I thought I would be writing a lot of country music with a lot of country artists aiming towards that space. And I don't think my process now is that different than what it was in LA. I do think more lyric-minded, more story-minded, maybe earlier in the process of writing now than I did in LA. And that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to be influenced, I think, by that Nashville way. But now I'll go to LA every 2 or 3 months, and I'll be there and work for 5 days and be so energetic and excited about that process. Because like now I'm becoming a Nashville writer. And so the LA way is kind of an inspiring thing to me. But it's definitely, I mean, there's genre lays out, like country music is narrative storytelling. The character starts here at the beginning of the song and ends up here. Rock music is about like abstract painting. It's phrases and words put together to convey an emotion. I mean, I was a teenager during the grunge era, and I think that music is amazing because it's so emotive, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
But it's not, I don't think rock music is supposed to be that. And I think great rock music was never supposed to be that. And then pop music is almost like you have this like nucleus of a concept, and then everything in the song is all these like directions pointing back to that spot, whether it's through like gimmicks of spinning metaphors around, or it's an emotional kind of core and everything's moving toward it. It's all three of those feel really, really different to me. And Nashville, I think its roots are in that narrative country tradition. And it can translate over to other genres, but it's interesting to see how that's where that starts, where the LA thing is more about the all parts aiming towards the center piece, which I think both, again, are great, just kind of different mechanisms to kind of play around with.
Right. It feels like rock has this central emotion, and the lyric is simply, like you said, it can be colors, it can be phrases that just feel good, sound good, and they're all informed by that central emotion that you feel. Whether you even know the lyrics to the song, you feel. You hear a Rage Against the Machine song, you know what they're wanting to say.
Yeah,
it feels like country music is a story.
Every line has to fit into the puzzle. Yeah,
right. And then pop music maybe would be a style. I feel like the melody is more king in pop music.
Right. It is proof, I think, of my rock roots that the songs that I love the most are the ones that I would have a hard time describing. Like if you pulled a line out of the second verse of a song that I really love, I couldn't really tell you why I wrote it that way or why in the room we decided that was a great line. But it connects to a thing that feels deeper than music to me. Some of it has to do with the performance too. When the artist sings it, you're like, I believe it when they say it that way. But also some of it is just, it's baked into the tapestry of whatever the song is. And I think that's a uniquely rock concept of how you write.
Do you think some of that is because it's emanating from the artist there? I mean, a rock band or even just a band in general, they're writing, for the most part, short of some pop constructed bands, they're writing stuff out of their experience. Whereas Nashville is run by songwriters in a way. It doesn't diminish the quality of the artist, but these songwriters are telling the stories a lot of times.
Yeah.
And a lot of times artists are even more amenable in Nashville to saying, hey, I'm going to come sit in a room with two legends who are used to telling stories, right? And I'm going to sing this song, and it relates to them. And of course the songwriters craft it, but I'm wondering if part of that is just the artist drives that rock experience. I mean, don't you think that in a band, you've been in so many bands, you guys are writing lyrics directly based on your experience, the way you view life. You're not necessarily telling stories per se. Right?
Yeah, I think that is part of it. I do think the Nashville model is changing, where it is becoming more artist focused, which is not necessarily bad. The only part about it that's bad to me is that Nashville was unique in that it was song focused, and it was the only town that was like that. And if that goes away here, then it won't exist anywhere like that. I love that artists in Nashville hold in high regard. They hold in higher regard the fact that they're songwriters and the fact that they're artists. I think that's kind of cool that like they want to learn the craft of it, and they want to be like a helpful process in the writing of it, where there are some versions in pop music where it's like, I don't know, just give me the best pop song and I don't need to be involved in that. And I'll probably take some publishing and put my name on it, but I actually won't be part of the process of it. I think part of the rock thing too is drugs. I think it's like deep in rock music culture, not just to be rebellious, but like the process of making the music is usually you're under the influence of something. And so the lines get kind of blurrier with that. And that usually means that the next day you'll wake up sober and you'll go, that was a horrible song. I can't believe we thought that was good at the time. But sometimes you tap into something that you never would have found before. So, and it's not that like pop stars or country stars don't do drugs, but I'm just saying it is part of the rock culture where it's like, how can I escape my brain a little bit and make a piece of art that my normal cerebral cortex wouldn't have like come up with if I had a 9-to-5 schedule for it.
Right. Like let's change our state of mind and then have an imprint on tape that represents that altered state of mind.
I mean, that's a lot of what hip hop music is now. And I think it's part of why hip hop music is so successful now is because it's the most rebellious kind of music. And I think that, you know, teenagers and people in their 20s, like they are looking for some kind of cultural rebellion. And hip hop has taken the place of rock in that space. But so many of those sessions happen between midnight and 7 a.m.
Right.
So many of those sessions, you're already fucked up before you even get to the session.
Right.
And so it's, again, so much wasted time. So much terrible music comes from it. But also some transcendent stuff that you never would have gotten to without like that weird journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I just flashed back to a story that David Conrad, he's retired now from the music business, but he was one of those legendary. I think he was the head of publishing at Universal back in the glory days when the publisher was literally walking tapes into these studios, right? And so David had brought me an artist, a fantastic artist who was still in town, and it was a project of his, and he was just doing it for fun at this point. And we would sit and we'd go drink whiskey at Jimmy Kelly's, and he would just tell me stories. He'd love to tell stories, and he would tell stories about he was the old school Music Row when he would just walk in. Everybody's Waylon's making his record in one studio, and 2 studios down, George Jones is there and Tammy Wynette.
That's
and
wild.
all these. And so he would just talk about just walking from studio to studio and just playing tapes, getting shit-faced with them and just playing them music.
That's wild.
And so I would just sit and ask questions, and we would eat a steak at Jimmy Kelly's. I mean, of course, the old school Nashville.
Is Jimmy Kelly still open?
Man, I don't even know. It's down near Exit Inn by Elliston.
Huh.
But David came into my studio one day. He just dropped by, and I said, "David, can you listen to a song I just did? Like, I wrote this song with an artist in town named Trent Dabbs." And the song actually ended up getting tons of syncs. So I know it was a good song.
Right.
And of course, I was playing it for him. I wanted his suggestion, but I also wanted him to hear it because I thought it was good. Right?
Yeah. That's really what we're doing. I'm not going to play you a song that's bad.
Yeah. I want you to affirm me. Can you affirm how badass I am? Listen to this song. But we do it under the guise of, hey, tell me what you think of this. Give me some critique. And he, like a legit old school, real publisher, I mean, those guys knew songs. He he got done listening to the song, and he's like, "Yeah, I it's good. It's good. I read the lyrics in that second verse to me." And I read the lyrics back, and he's like, "I don't get it. Like, what are you saying?" And these lyrics, David, they were poetic. They were good.
Yeah.
They sounded good.
Right.
And
I'm sure with you and Trent, 2 4s making a piece of art together. Come on.
Right.
Yeah.
They sounded good. They created a picture. They were colors. They were sounds. They were smells emanating off the paper. I mean, God, it was like a veritable cornucopia of just like sensation in my view. And David was like, "I don't get it. Like, I don't know what you're saying, Jamie." And of course, he said in that slow country drawl,
Right.
with a black mustache, just kind of peering over these horn-rimmed glasses. And he said, what are you saying?
That's great.
And I said, "Well, I'm saying this." He goes, "Well, then say it. Say it." And he goes, "Man, music needs to be furnitures." And he grabbed my my coffee table and he smacked it. And he's like, "Furniture, man. Music, these lyrics need to be furniture. Like, you need to be able to hold on to it." He goes, "Make it sound pretty, great, but you got to tell me what you're saying." And I always remember that. I think that's the beauty of Nashville. It's like I had come out of singer-songwriter world. It's like create an emotion, create a sound of the lyric, create the vowels and all this. And he was like, say
Just
something.
say the thing you need to say.
Yeah. So that's the beauty
cool.
of Nashville, is that not that there's anything wrong with a general. I mean, we all know the paintings we can look at on a wall, and we don't even know what the hell's going on there, but it makes us feel something because of the way that they use the shades and the colors. And so lyrics a lot of times can be like that. But I do think that that's a beautiful piece of Nashville that.
Yeah, it is about how is this helping the arc of my character get across? And the good thing about that is, and I think I've found this to be true for myself writing country songs over writing pop songs or rock songs, is that you know when you got it right. And I think with more poetic forms, you just you're not sure if you really got it right or not. It's got to bounce off someone, and the way it bounces off them is going to be the thing. But there's a way to read down, I think, a lyric on a country song where you go, oh yeah, we did it. We got it right. I think Max Martin looks at pop music and probably can frame it out that way, but he's thinking probably more about melody and like the structure of that.
Right.
But like my favorite country song I've ever written is a song that Tom Douglas, who is a legend, he and Maren Morris and I wrote, Dear Hate, that you mentioned earlier. And I remember Tom came into the room that day. I had written with Tom a handful of times before, and we had a really good rapport. I had written with Maren a handful of times before, but those two hadn't met. And we sit down to write, and it was 2 days after that kid shot up a church in South Carolina, and it was just this cloud kind of hanging over the city. And Tom came in and he said, I think I know what we should write today. I think we should write a song called Dear Hate. And a thing that happens in Nashville writing rooms is someone says a title that seems provocative to the rest of the group, and then you kind of bat it around a little bit of, okay, how do we get to this angle? And there's usually 2 or 3 different ways you could do it. One of them seems too obvious. One of them seems like you'd actually never get there. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is like, oh, this is the Goldilocks bowl. This one is not too hot or too cold. We'll find our way with this one. But that song, automatically, all 3 of us knew, okay, the language that we use as we're writing this letter to hate, we know how it's all supposed to lay out. Tom brought an angle to it that I thought was really beautiful, where he's like, as I'm writing to hate, it's not necessarily even an external thing from me, but it's something that's weaved into who I am as well. So not just trying to say hate is a thing that I am not, but hate is a thing that's immersed in all of us. But I remember finishing that day, Maren and I looked at each other at the very beginning like, oh man, if we get this wrong, we'll know it. There's a certain kind of like heavy topic. That's one thing I love about writing with Tom. I've never written a song with Tom that was throwaway. I've written bad songs with him, but we're always aiming at something that seems like really important and substantial. And Maren and I looked at each other like, if we don't get this right, we'll definitely know it. And we will have done a disservice to this title and a disservice to this town if we don't do this right. And it was a slog of a session, digging through a lot of heavy stuff to get to the end of it. But I knew when that song was finished and we looked at the lyric and Maren sang it down, we all 3 looked at each other. It's like, I don't know if this song will ever make any money. I don't know if anyone will ever cut. This was before Maren had a record deal. But I know we've written a great song. And I think country music can offer you that because of that furniture of it. It's like, no, right. It all fits together, right. And it's steady, and you can tell that it's steady, and it does what it's supposed to do. Country music's great for that.
Such a scary feeling when you have a good concept that you've stumbled on a good concept, and then you're like, we've somehow here's our ending.
Yeah, exactly.
we've somehow got to find our way there.
Yeah, exactly. And so his dad is the villain, but he doesn't know he's his dad until the second movie, and then somehow he has to save his dad from the emperor at the end. I know how we end the story. I don't know how we begin it. Yeah,
but it's hard. But the emperor is actually the son of his first wife's
right, exactly.
sister.
Thanks, George.
And yeah, that is a trepidatious feeling when the more compelling it is, the more it's going to show itself to be. You're exactly right. The more it's going to show itself to be wrong if you don't get it, because it's such a articulate, or it's such a cogent idea. So it demands it demands a great roadmap, which is super scary to work backwards on that.
It is. The young writers have asked me over the years, like, as you write more, I'm convinced that the great songs are almost just as sparse. And I never know when they're going to happen or what combination of people we're going to end the day and go, wow, we really wrote a fantastic song today. Those are just as sparse today as they were 20 years from me. Mm-hmm. But you just don't write bad songs anymore over time. So there is a part of it that becomes that we can trick ourselves. That, like, if I'm writing songs from a scale of 1 to 10, the 10s are just really, really hard to find. And like with Evanescence, we just stumbled on some stuff that some people think are 10s, and we just didn't really know it at the time. it just felt good to us in the moment. And in the early days of songwriting, I'm writing a ton of 1s and 2s and 3s, and they're all just garbage songs. So at least the 10s, that 7 or 8 number difference, you go, oh, this one works and these don't. Over time, my worst songs just get better and better. And especially in this town, because so many people know the real craft of writing a song, sit down with an instrument and can really tell a story and write a song. Every song's going to be at least a 5 or a 6.
Right.
Unless we're really swinging for the fences in a genre that we don't understand at all. So if it's going to be at least a 5 or a 6 and someone comes in with a really brilliant idea, we're at least going to make it a 5 or a 6. And the idea alone maybe bumps it up another number. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced that the only songs that really matter are the 9s and the 10s. So if you're in a room with professional songwriters that have a great idea, like that song, I Drive Your Truck, the Jesse Alexander, I think that is such a brilliant concept for how to write a song, especially in a country context, because it has truck in the title, and so you think it's a thing that it wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. They could have written versions of that song that were like 5s and 6s and maybe got it cut because the concept is cool enough. Mm-hmm. But I love that like they really stuck with it. I think it was Connie and Jesse that started the idea and then pulled Jimmy Yeary in because they knew like we're not quite there yet.
Right.
So I love the dedication of like, hey, this is really special. I don't want to force it through. I want to make sure all the right pieces are in the room to really get it to that place.
Right.
Yeah.
Has an opportunity to be a 10, so you don't want to waste. There aren't a ton of concepts that have the upside of a 10.
Yeah, that's true.
So you've been in a ton of bands, like I mentioned. What I end up quoting Feng Zhu a lot for whatever reason. I think part of the reason is he delineates between professionalism and talent. Or the other way around, actually, talent and professionalism. And he says anybody can be talented. A lot of talented people, but to be a professional is difficult because it's almost like, in a sense, weaponizing that talent into a serviceable craft that actually you can call upon every day. Yeah,
that's great. The rhythm of it is a big part. Yeah, like I can actually access this thing as opposed to just a thing floating in the ether. Yeah.
So all of us, in whatever genesis we started, a lot of it was as an artist. I started as an artist, and I realized pretty quickly I was a shitty singer, so I had to transition to songwriting and production. But it's very difficult. A lot of people can't make that transition from writing as an artist, which essentially as a creative, you come up with ideas. You maybe have a 10-song album, and it might have taken you 8 months to write that album.
Right.
And you come up with an idea in the morning in the shower, at night when you're drinking, you form it over the next 3, 4, 5 months. Maybe you don't even finish it for a year. Essentially, when the wave hits, you take it.
Right.
You have the luxury to kind of wait for the wave to hit. You write it when you feel like it, when you're inspired. And the transition out of being an artist writer, just as Feng Zhu would call it, talented, to being a professional is we got to wake up every morning and write a song. Like we got to start with a blank page, and that artist is showing up in the room. The publisher has it on the schedule, and you only got a few cancels in the course of your year before you start being known as the dude that cancels, right? Yeah. So you gotta access that, and it doesn't matter if you feel it or not. You got to come up with a song, and you've got to somehow access your musicality, all those things that you used to have to be inspired to play a great part, to write a good melody, to right. How did you make the transition? Because most artists don't.
They don't,
make the transition from being a guy in a band. And there's a long way around this question, David, but you didn't just transition from band and artist to writing for people. You were actually doing it simultaneous, which to me is one of the most impressive parts of your career. Is a lot of guys will jump out of it, right? The Dan Wilsons, I think if I'm not mistaken,
that sounds
band, jump out, finds a way to transition, writes Adele hits, right? You kind of did it simultaneously. You were an artist, and you were also writing with Celine and Kelly Clarkson, and kind of at the same time you were signing a record deal, right?
Kind of, yes. They were kind of having simultaneously. You said you start as an artist, because we all do, because our first vision of a music maker is seeing an artist on a stage. And I just assume Madonna wrote those songs. I just assume Chris Martin wrote those songs. I don't know any differently. So I think our first instinct of it is that. Secondly, I got to learn an instrument and learn a craft. And I probably don't have other friends in middle school or high school that are that interested in it and are going to sit around while I learn it, and I'm going to sit around while they learn it. So I think we start off like that just out of necessity of like, that's the only version of it that we know. Mm-hmm. You said early on you found out that you were a pretty bad singer, and so you pivoted over. I'm a pretty good singer, and that, I think, caused part of the problem for me, is that I thought, well, because I can convey these songs in a way that's somewhat convincing, I thought that I should do that. And it took until I was 30 to realize that I'm not an artist.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, so Evanescence, I don't know, early 20s when we got signed with Evanescence. And then I signed with a band called Trading Yesterday about 3 years after that. And then about 4 or 5 years after that, I signed a solo artist deal with Warner Brothers. And so each time I'm kind of picking it up and playing around with it. And part of it is because I thought that my talent, the thing that I didn't really have to earn or work for, because I could play an instrument and sing a song and people didn't cringe by it, that I was like, oh, okay, I guess that means that I should be an artist. But the focus of an artist and a songwriter is really, really different. And like you said, so many people don't bridge that gap. Mm-hmm. What I did learn is in the end of, so when we were making the Evanescence record, Ben and I, every day we would wake up and we would go to this practice space on Santa Monica and Cole in West Hollywood. And we would spend 8 hours a day teaching each other Pro Tools. We would just go back and forth. He'd sit at the desk and I'd be working on a piano part or finding sounds on a keyboard. And then we'd switch and I'd sit at the rig and I'd be like cleaning stuff up and editing things, and he'd be working on guitar parts. I tell young producers this, because we taught each other Pro Tools, we spent 2 years not knowing that there was a grid mode. Can you imagine the hours of your life lining things up in slip mode all the time? I mean, it's insane as we're like trying to get kicks and snares lined up.
Goodness sake.
Totally crazy. So that's the problem with teaching each other when neither of us knew what we were doing.
You must appreciate that record so much all the time.
Oh, it's crazy. So we're teaching each other Pro Tools. We're spending 8 hours a day. And in the course of 18 months, 24 months, we wrote 15 songs. Because there was no part of our brain that was like, every day I should write a song. That didn't seem necessary to us. What we knew is we needed to make a great album. And so if we had a song, the framing of a song, and we thought the verse was great, but the chorus just wasn't as great as the verse, then we'd scrap it and we'd write a new chorus. We'd write a new bridge. We'd switch the arrangement around. We'd switch the key of it around. And so we're tinkering around, having essentially like a sound bed and some melodies, and we would pass that off to Amy. And then she would walk around the city, walk up Runyon Canyon, have her Discman in, and she's listening to this stuff and she's journaling and writing stuff down. And then she'd come in 2 weeks later and she'd have a form of a lyric in, and then we'd do the last 10% of like kind of shaping and putting stuff back in place. And then we'd scrap the verse. And so as those 2 weeks of her working on it, we're working on the next thing. And so we spent the type of hours that a songwriter or a producer would spend, but we didn't do it in the framing of like, I'm going to write 100 songs in a year or more. That made me really fall in love with just the editing and re-editing process of it, because each time we feel like it was getting better and better. But by the end of that album, for anyone who's listened to that first Evanescence record, I was so tired of songs that started in a minor key and ended in a minor key and were between 75 and 94 beats per minute, that had a guitar riff and a piano and string part. Like it was all. It's not that it was all commercial music, all art is formulaic in a certain sense. It's just that we had told that story so many times in a sonic way, and even in I think a lyrical storytelling way, that I was towards the end of that album, as we were recording the record in the studio, I was listening to Jason Mraz and John Mayer, and just something as far away from that music as possible, because I was so tired of just that thing all the time. And I think those were the early seeds to me that I was a songwriter, is that I love so many different ways of telling stories. I love the intricacies and the beauty of so many different genres of music. I think rock music is in my bones, but if I had the option of working with rock bands every day or not, I would not work with rock bands every day. I don't want to do one thing all the time. And I love that this job allows us to kind of play around with different versions of it.
Right. Hey, folks, I want to talk to you a little bit about the sponsor for our podcast, Love Justice International. Love Justice International is an organization very, very dear to my heart. Did you know that 40 million people, as we speak, are living in slavery as a result of human trafficking in our modern day society? Love Justice is an organization that actually attacks that trafficking, and they do it at its most strategic point while it's occurring, but most importantly, before the men, women, and children have been exploited. They're in 19 different countries, and in those 19 different countries, they've worked with authorities to arrest over 950 suspects and have prevented over 24,000 people from being trafficked. This is so very important. So if you get a second, please go to their website, lovejustice.ngo, and for just a couple bucks a month, couple cups of coffee, you can literally stop a girl or a boy from being exploited or enslaved. So once again, take a minute, go to lovejustice.ngo, lovejustice.ngo. Thanks. So you would say that the reason why you think you would define yourself as not an artist is because you like to wear multiple hats, and an artist is intrinsically, this is my thing. I don't equivocate. Yeah. I just know that this is it. Fuck you if you don't get it. This is it.
I think that's the second reason that I know that I'm not an artist. But the first reason I know I'm not an artist is that I don't care about performing. Right. It really doesn't matter to me. I'll play a half a dozen writer rounds in Nashville a year, and I'm not bad at it. I'm not great at it, but I'm not bad at it. And afterwards, some sweet 55-year-old woman will come up and say, I feel like I should hear your voice on the radio. It's like, honey, the things that it would take to get my voice on the radio, the amount of work that it takes to do that thing, the amount of time I spend away from my kids sleeping on a tour bus, the amount of time I have to go to a gym and have to continually be pretty and pretend that I'm younger than I actually am. That's all that stuff. A, isn't music, and I'd rather be making music. And B, it just feels like bullshit to me. Like I really love the creative process of writing. Mm-hmm. And second to that, I really enjoy production of like getting a song that's on a piano or a guitar into a recording that's finished. I like the songwriting part by far the best, but second to that, the production part I really do enjoy. I love listening back to a record. And I was telling this artist this the other day, hearing your song on the radio is great. Walking on stage and hearing people call your name and winning an award, that's really awesome. Especially, oddly enough, I actually like the BMI. People outside of the industry don't know what a BMI or ASCAP is, but the BMI awards, it's a room just full of your peers.
Right.
And there's something about the respect that comes with that that's really, really cool. But the best part about our job, easily the best part about our job, is those 100 or so emails I send off a year of like, here's the finished demo or whatever, initial recording of this song that we wrote a couple of days ago. The euphoria of hearing, of being able to listen back to this thing that didn't exist and that we made, it beats all of it. It beats all of it on such a high level to me that it's not that doesn't matter to artists. Obviously, artists love that. But artists feed off of this energy of performing in front of people in a way that I think is pretty cool. Like you get something out of that you that you can't get in a studio. I'm just not wired to care about it. It doesn't matter to me.
Right. Yeah, you send off that email and then 2 days go by, you hear nothing. It's just you hate yourself. You hate your life.
That's the other part of it. I honestly don't care about the response. I send off the email, and then when I drive, and then I shut my rig down, and then I get in my car to drive home. And the song that I have been listening to for the past 2 days, constructing and building, I listen to it in my car, and that is my bliss. Mm-hmm. And if they hit me back right away and go, this song is amazing, it's going to be our next single, I'm like 10% happier. If they don't hit me back at all for 2 months, I'm exactly where I was before. True. The bulk of my happiness comes from, look at this beautiful thing that we've made.
Right. Man, I think that variable right there that you just articulated is one of the biggest differences between a young creative, master creator, songwriter, producer, and an experienced creator. Is at the beginning of my career, I would live and die by you turn in a track and what do the A&R think? Do they like it? Did you miss it? What does the artist think? Did you miss it? Do they love it? And my identity would rest on every email I sent, every WeTransfer I sent. It would just, right? And then as you get older, you start to realize, oh no, the glory of this is the product. It's the product, which is why you grind on it, which is why you bleed for it, is because you have to put your head on the pillow at the end of the night, and you have to know that it's good. Yeah. And you have to wake up at 4 a.m. and go, oh shit, it's not right. I didn't turn off the delay send after the second chorus. Like that kind of stuff will stick in your brain. Yeah. I remember the Steve Jobs book. I remember him talking about that. This resonated with me so much, but he was talking about how he grilled when they made one of the first Macs. He opened up the back panel, the piece, the inside guts that nobody would ever see.
Right.
He opened it up and it looked like shit. And he went to them and he said, "We're not releasing this. This looks horrible." And one of his main programmers, maybe it was Woj, whoever it was like, nobody's gonna know.
Right.
Nobody can even look at this. And Steve Jobs looks at him, he goes, "You'll know, and I'll know." And he said, "Do you think when I think that the illustration he used, he said, when you go and you look at an amazing cabinet, like a cabinet from an Italian furniture maker, he goes, do you think you would see this incredibly ornate, beautiful, artistic design on the front and all these details and attention shown to the details, and then you turn it around on the piece that faces the wall and there's just like cardboard and plywood and just shitty finishing nail?" He says, "No way." He says, "Why? Because people are going to see it?" "No, because that artist knows he goes to sleep, he knows if you pull it away from the wall, you're going to see these this shitty cardboard." And that to me is the difference between it's the difference between being finished when you're really finished,
right,
or being finished when it's right. Is when you go to sleep, you know if it's not right, even if they can't hear it. And
right.
I hate that response when people say, "Nobody will ever hear that."
I didn't get into this business for that. Yeah.
I mean, a true painter assumes that nobody will know what he did with the shades and the tones of the paint.
Yeah.
A true painter assumes that's the case. So to say to him, "Nobody knows," he would say, "I don't give a shit. I know that their feeling that they feel when they look at it is changed by the things that I do that they don't know what they're."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that response, nobody will ever hear that, is always the most insane thing to me. Well, of course they won't, but they'll feel something different because we showed this attention to detail.
I think they will feel something different. If they don't, I still don't care.
Well, true. True.
There's been a handful of times that I'll work on a song with an artist, or write a song with an artist, and then I'm working on it for a couple of days after that. And I remember Fakayo and I were laughing about this once. The song comes to a natural kind of ending, and then I spent another 6 hours building this like minute-long outro, because that was part of the Evanescence thing. Is like we wanted there to be a sense of grandness to the songs. I remember on the Fallen record, one song ended with this like kind of static string pad, and then it started to evolve into this other thing, different tempo. I think the keys were the same, but it kind of moved into this different pattern that opened up to the next song. And it was our favorite part of the record because we weren't just like writing singles, we were creating a piece of art.
Sure.
That to us really mattered, that it felt like it flowed together in this longer kind of, I don't know, Homer's Odyssey type of story. So on this demo with an artist that I haven't been paid any money for, because for those who aren't in the songwriting business, we don't get paid any money. Like if we succeed and a song becomes successful, we get paid. And how much we get paid for that is a conversation that's not worth having to me right now. But we get paid zero money for anything we ever do unless it actually really succeeds.
And even another way to put that is 95% of the time that we work, we don't make any money.
Not like we made a little bit of money. We make zero money. So anyway, so this song with this artist that probably is going to get dropped and wasn't going to cut my song in the first place. I spent all this time building this beautiful outro piece to it because I just loved the chord progression and how it seemed to fit in the song in a certain way. And Vakai was like, why are you like making sure all the crossfades and the outro are like perfectly put in place? I was like, because my favorite part of it is that in 10 years from now, I'm still going to be listening to this recording and it's going to matter to me, even if the artist cuts it off or you know, whatever happens after this, I can't control. What I can control is I want this piece of art to feel beautiful to me in the ways that I want it to.
Yeah.
But it's that weird obsession that I mean, I know you're a weirdo like that too. It's like everything that comes out of your studio sounds on a level of professionalism that is not necessary for our job. But it's because you're not doing it to like be on the competing level with other people. It's because you're making art. So like,
well, David, you and I have talked about this a lot, but it comes down to what do you see as your legacy? And some people see money as their legacy. Some people see position. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you think, you know, the cut or the paycheck or the accolade or the position or the next job you get, or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. But what you define as your legacy is going to dictate how you work.
Right.
And I think what you're talking about is anytime we send off that MP3, embedded in that MP3 is just our soul, emotions, all the years of learning melodies and learning lyrics and learning how they flow together and what sounds good. And all of that is art. And if you see your legacy as that, then that's where the value is. And so that's not very pragmatic. Now, the way you become a professional is inserting some pragmatism in that. Okay, I can't work on this outro for 3 days, even though I'd love to because of X. I've got deadlines, you know. But there's a balance because at the end, I think the legacy piece or the reward or the do it for the art lasts longer. And I think, like you said, at the end of our life, when we're listening back to that, to that music, that's what we're going to care about.
Yeah.
We probably might not even know how much money that song, who cut it or what, but we're going to listen to that recording.
Yeah.
And we're going to know, man, I remember what I was feeling when I was playing that outro. Man, you know who I just thought of that I haven't thought of in a while? Did you ever get into Sigur Rós?
Oh yeah. Especially the first record and then the parentheses record. Those two I really, really.
Was it Talk?
Good with.
Talk, parentheses and Talk or something like that.
Seems right.
Maybe the Talk second. So they were really great at outros.
Oh man. I mean, the whole song was an outro, yeah.
But it would go on forever. But man, check this out. To your point, I remember going and seeing, my brother introduced me to Sigur Rós. And he said, Jamie, they're playing at the Ryman. And we had been listening to it at the house. He was living with me at the time. We'd been listening to Sigur Rós. And he's like, they're playing at the Ryman. We got to go see it. And it was probably the crazy thing for those of you who don't know this band. They're Icelandic and they don't even sing in English.
Or they don't even speak in Icelandic or sing in Icelandic. It's a made up thing.
It's isn't it a native, like an older?
I don't think it's a real language.
Oh, it isn't.
And I don't even think it's like they're Tolkien and they made up a language. I think it really is just syllables. I could be wrong, but I've always thought that the whole point of it was that they were just emoting. And like when they perform live, it's the same syllables that they did on the record, but I don't think it's a language.
Gotcha. I had heard.
If not, I'm going to feel really dumb about that.
We should check that out. Mike, look that up because Flavatown, Mike. Sorry.
Flavatown.
Flavatown. I think I had heard rumblings about, and who knows what of this is true, but that it was this forbidden language, almost equivalent of like an old Gaelic.
Even better.
Right, I hope it was. But all that to say, probably 4 or 5 songs in, they're not 3-minute songs. So 4 or 5 songs at a Sigur Rós concert is different than Evanescence.
Indeed.
No, they were engaging in this outro, and it was the same 3 chords. It was 3 chords, and it was an odd meter, but it was the same thing over and over. And they must have gone 12, 13, 14 minutes. And it was this mantra. It was this droll of just this, and it kept just something about the repetition of it. And they would vary parts, and the droning strings and the drum pattern. And it was this just tribal feeling and there was this feeling in the Ryman that you could just feel this mounting tension and just people, and all of a sudden I start.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Crying. And I look over at my brother and he's got tears. And then I was like, are we sissies? We're sitting at the Ryman in the front row of the balcony. We're sitting here crying. And I look.
Front row of the balcony is a great way to watch it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I turn around, and because the light show was so smoke, and I turn around and I see everybody in the balcony. All I can see is wet faces. And that was compelling to me.
Yeah.
Because there was this uniform feeling. It wasn't just in me. It wasn't just in Brian. It was everybody was feeling that. And it was from an outro.
Yeah. And it's from a part of music that didn't have lyrics to it. This is where Nashville does get it wrong, I think. Story really matters. But there's a reason why we put these sequences of chords together. The reason why so often with a vocalist you push them to the edge of their comfortable range, because we're tapping into something with frequencies and hertz that we don't fully understand, but it literally resonates the bones in our body. Yeah, again, like as a kid growing up with Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, I don't know what Scott Weiland was singing about, but when he sang, it moved me. It mattered to me because it was bigger than the words of it. Sigur Rós is probably the perfect. I think Radiohead's kind of like that too. Yeah, same. There's this thing about those bands as well that I don't know if this is. I'm trying to frame parts of the world with generations that, like, you and I are both Gen X, and it's just, we're just different than millennials. We're different than baby boomers. There's a certain gestalt to 90s art, filmmaking, music. Television really hadn't found its golden age yet, but there's this kind of, at worst, nihilism, but this introspective version of it, where it's like rock and roll music used to be like, fuck the authority, and then it moved its way into the 90s where it's like the enemy is within, and there's some introspective version of art, I think, that's connected to our generation, that my favorite artist on stage is the one that doesn't care that I'm there. That, like, they're almost, and Radiohead, I think, looks a lot like that, where it's like they're making the art for each other or for themselves, and we just happen to be a spectator of it. Trent Reznor was really great at that too. Like, Nine Inch Nails was not performing for an audience. And there's a performative aspect to even being introspective, but at least it seemed like they were doing it because the art called to them, as opposed to like, I want to make sure that all of you people are impressed by what I'm doing.
Right. Even bands like Sunny Day Real Estate, or like Jeremy Enig, Pedro the Lion, some of those early emo, maybe the navel gazing piece of that was obviously irritating at some point, but you're right. It definitely turned to introspective.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's annoying when you can tell that it's a front. But I think when you lean in and believe the artist in it, like this new Taylor Swift record, I think it's beautiful. I think it's really, the tapestry of it is really great. And I have a handful of friends that are like, oh, this is just her next angling piece of like, she knew that this would be the thing that would make her seem authentic. And so she did it. It's like, you can live your life that way, assuming the worst version of it. And I'm sure there's a component in her brain, because she's a really, really savvy business person, that could see, okay, with this haircut and these colors and these sounds and these photographs, that it fits into it. But
Sure.
But it really feels like a true artistic expression at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a firm believer that any human's most authentic moment is still inauthentic.
Yeah.
You know, there's no perfect. There's no, hey, I got it 100% right.
Right.
You know, there's no, I sometimes pounce on this a little too much, but it's very rarely either or. It's both and most of the time. So with Taylor, speaking of outros, you and I listened to that album
that was
all
so
the way
good.
through. That was the first time I'd heard it. And
Same for me.
And I remember waking up the next morning and go, David, was that record really good because we were so high?
That's true. That's part of the thing. And part of me thinks, well, maybe I should listen to something completely sober the first time. But it's like, why? I want to be lost in the magic of the thing. Yeah.
Sure. But to your point, so continue the Taylor Swift piece. Yeah, of course she's got trappings, professional trappings that she has to engage in that. But I mean, if two cynics like you and I can listen to that album and get done with it and say, that felt pretty damn authentic. Like that's the clearest I've seen her expressed in an album yet, especially lyrically. I felt
the progression of it was cool. I mean, and maybe there's some self-preservation in that, in my approach to, and why I push back against people with this authenticity piece is because I spend all of my days trying to get as many tools as I can in my tool belt to help an artist be as authentic as possible. Probably my first experiences with music, I started writing songs when I was 15. And so those were obviously really transformative for me to see a thing that I had made that didn't exist before. But I played and led worship at a church for probably the first 10 years, 15 to 25 or so. I did that a lot. And I knew that as I'm standing up there playing, that if I went to the 6th chord, that it has a response with the audience. I know that if I hold on this thing, I know that if I turn the band up, that we do this chorus one more time, if we go just a little bit faster with the tempo, if I play with these dynamics, that I'm eliciting a response from the congregation. And you can call that manipulative or bullshit, or you can call that an authentic spiritual experience. And the truth is, yeah, it is those.
right.
Because for me to become a good craftsman, what does he call it? Not talent, but professional. For me to be a professional, I have to create an environment for an artist to walk in, and my tricks, my inauthentic tricks, allow their authenticity to really flourish. That's my, and I think that's my, if there's like a one-line job of this is what a real songwriter is that I'm laying the groundwork for an artist, a 19-year-old girl, a 65-year-old guy, whoever the artist is, a band on their 3rd album, whatever it is, that I create an environment where they don't have to be technicians. They don't, and I try to push from them as much as possible anything that is not art. I don't care what your last album is, and I don't care how well it did. I don't care what's on the radio now and what you should be aiming for. I don't care how much time we have today to write this song or from now until when you need to put the album out. Truth be told, I care about all of those things, and it's my job to care about it. My hope is that the artist, if I do my job well, then the artist doesn't have to care about any of that stuff.
You take it out of their hands.
Because I'm going to be the one who says, hey, we've been working for 3 hours. Let's go grab some lunch. Now, it's not about control for me. If the artist wants to take control of those environments, and that's great. It makes my job easier. But what I want to do is I want I think to be completely authentic, to be completely artistic, to dig into your own story and tell story and to dig into your own story and make art that really matters and is compelling from that space is impossibly hard. So if I can take care of as many other details around it, and you don't have to worry about the tempo, and you don't have to worry about the key that we're in, and you don't have to worry about how long the second verse is compared to the first verse, then I'm giving you as much brain space to explore your thing, to tell something authentically, because I'm doing all that. Now, does that make me inauthentic? I don't think so. I think it makes me a good partner.
Well, you're a shepherd essentially. You're leading them into a space.
Yeah.
And you're clearing things out of the way. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great way to put it. And I think one of the big mistakes that artists can make is to feel like, well, I know what that compressor does. I know what,
Right.
I know where we want to eat. I know,
Right.
I know. Well, yeah, you do, but you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I heard this amazing story about Paul Simon, who, this is the quintessential artist who just like focus on writing hit songs because you're a fucking legend. So focus on that. And as much of the shit you don't have to worry about, let everybody else around you handle that, so you can be very, very simple in your craft. Because like you said, it's incredibly impossible to be an artist and to be an authentic artist, but it takes focus. It like takes immersion. It takes like non-distraction and singularity. So anyway, the story goes, it was an engineer who was a guy in Nashville who was a second on a session, and he thought Paul Simon came out of the vocal booth and he thought he was going to be engaged with Paul and tell him something that was kind of clever and get a conversation. So Paul was like, well, that felt pretty good, guys, and I feel really good about it. And he walks out and he says, the engineer looks at him and says, man, yeah, in that the chorus, I pushed a little delay. I pushed some delay onto your vocal to kind of give it some, and he's like, oh, way too technical. I'll leave that to you guys. Delay.
That was too much.
Which I was like, thank God. Holy shit, that's amazing. Paul Simon knew I just sit around and write songs like Cecilia.
Yeah.
So don't talk to me about delay. Right?
Oh, that's fantastic.
I think that in and of itself, that singularity, that small focus. I mean, you think of it like a laser, David. The wider that laser is, essentially, the more diluted it is.
Yeah.
The tighter it gets, the stronger it is. So artists, it's really tricky because artists have, especially today when they got to get their own business started, it's like starting your own.
Especially now with the social media components of it, it's just a lot. Yeah.
So much. And so artists come in and they just think that they're working hard by talking about attorneys, talking about managers, talking about the social media thing, talking about all this stuff. And it's like, hey, this is not how you work hard at the beginning. The best way you can work hard is write amazing songs.
Yeah.
Find out what you have to say. Find out what is you. All that shit, it'll take care of itself. It's like a restaurant. You can work on you look around Never Never. You can work on the paneling. You can work on the design. And at the end of the day, if you don't have good food, nobody's going to come.
Who cares? Yeah.
Focus on the food first, and then you can worry about the style of chair that you're going to pull to the table,
And a lot of times I think people will say, man, I focused on the food so much that I lost all this money because we didn't market it right, or I lost all this money because the decor wasn't whatever. Yeah, of course you will. But if you don't do the first things, then there's no need to even worry about the second things at all. I have this, whenever I go to like talk at colleges or talk to young songwriters, a common question is like, how do I get into the business? And the good thing is in 2020, your capacity for exposure is well higher than it ever was at any other time. So like the exposure piece, I think me as a kid growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas in the 1980s and 90s, there were no musicians in that town. There was no music industry. There's no one I ever knew who got a record deal before. Exposure could be like a reasonable thing to worry about in a town like that at that time. But especially with social media, with YouTube now, it doesn't matter where you are. It should matter about the food. You got to make good content. So I didn't necessarily know that at the time, but Ben and Amy and I, Amy was still in high school. I was working at Circuit City, and Ben had this job at a voiceover studio. And we'd get home. He and I would get home from work around 5 every day, and we'd work till like 3 a.m. on music. And Amy would come over after school for a few hours and have to go home. And we're just like cobbling together this art that mattered to us. And yeah, we probably did want to stand on stage in front of 10,000 people in Germany at one day, but it was the same thing as it's always been. I just wanted to go to sleep that night listening to a thing that I had made that didn't exist before. So we spent 6-8 months making this, what we thought was our magnum opus, and it turned out to be our demo CD that got assigned. But, and I listened back to it now, it's like, those recordings were horrible, but there were nuggets of brilliance in the songs that were there. And I really tip my hat to Diana Meltzer, the A&R for Wind Up Records. She could hear through the noise of those recordings and hear that there was something really special there in those songs and in Amy's voice. We finished making this CD in our apartment. And we didn't have any money for anything. We never went to a recording studio to do drums or real guitars or anything else. So it's just all cobbled together by me and Ben. And every CD that we had ever loved, at the bottom of it, it said mastered by. And we were like, what is this mastering you speak of? We don't know what mastering is, but we thought every real record is mastered. So maybe that's a thing we should do to our recordings. So we look in the phone book. This is, again, like search engines. And we find that there's a mastering studio in Memphis, Tennessee. Do you know Ardent Studios? Yeah. So it's it's been around for a while. I mean, there's a lot of like legendary places in Memphis. It's a 2-hour drive from Little Rock. So we call up Ardent Studios. Hey, we hear you have a mastering like person there. Can we get our record master? They said, yeah, come up next Saturday. It'll be $1,000 and we'll get it done for you. So we pack up our computer and monitor and keyboard. We get all of our, because we don't know what mastering is. Like, we're just bringing our studio to you. We drive to Memphis. We show up at this place at noon or so. And we're so excited because our record's going to get mastered. And no professional hands have touched our music.
Right.
So we don't know. We know that we like how it sounds. We know that it doesn't sound great, but we know that we like how it sounds. And we don't know how different it's going to sound from beginning to end of whatever this mastering process is going to be. So we're really excited. And $1,000 was a lot of money for us to cobble together at that time. So we go in, and there's a guy named Brad Blackwood who's been a friend over the years that was like the in-house mastering guy. And we walk in, and we're like, where do we need to put the computer? And he was like, do you have just like a CD of your record? We're like, oh yeah, we have this here. And he's like, that's all I'll need. We're like, oh, we knew that.
Had you mixed it at least?
We had mixed. I mean, It was as mixed as we were going to make it, right?
Sure.
So we handed him the CD, and he was like, get lost for 2 hours, come back, and I'll be pretty close with it. So we leave for 2 hours. We come back 2 hours later. He goes, here's your CD. We hand him a check. We drive home. We listen to it in the car, really excited, and it's a little bit louder. And Brad Blackwood's good at his job. I'm not saying he didn't do anything, but it's like, to untrained ears, the mastering process is a little bit pretty nuanced. So we go home, and a week later, we get a call from someone, and then cut 3 months later, we have a record deal. So in those 2 hours that we were gone, there was a band called Dust for Life that was signed to Wind Up Records. Wind Up Records exists because their first band was Creed, and Creed sold 30 million copies. And when your band sells 30 million copies, you have a lot of capital to sign different bands. Mm-hmm. So one of the bands they signed was this band called Dust for Life, and they were in room A at Ardent. And the lead singer, Gavin, had 2 bottles of water that morning and had to pee. And the bathroom at Ardent Studios happened to be on the other side of the mastering room. And the door to the mastering room happened to be open while Brad was working on one of our songs. And Gavin walks down the hallway to the bathroom, and in the 2 seconds that he walks by that room, the mastering room, he hears literally, I don't know, a second and a half of music. goes to the bathroom, comes back again, hears a little bit more, and he pokes his head in and he's like, hey, what's this? Brad's like, oh, I don't know, some kids from Little Rock. It's some band they put together. It's like, oh, cool. Can I get a copy of it when it's done? He's like, sure, whatever. He goes back to his room. He listens to the CD, plays it for the A&R at the label. They really like it. They fly us up to New York about a month later. And then again, 2 months later, we have a record deal and we're moved out to LA. The importance of that story is not how lucky I am. It is that we had a compelling enough piece of art that in that really limited window of exposure that it caught somebody's ear. Mm-hmm. There's a million stories of people interacting with your art in ways that you never would have known, but it wasn't compelling enough to like draw somebody's ear in. Now, are we lucky that that happened? Of course we are. But I think if we had been focusing all of our time on, hey, if we could just get in front of this A&R guy, if we move all of our stuff to this place, if we could camp out in front of this guy's house, if I just keep calling this person up. And there's a lot of stories, I think, of successful artists who called every A&R number that they could and finally got someone on the line.
They probably had something compelling enough already.
I'm not opposed to the hustle. I just think if the second thing outweighs the first thing, then you've really missed the point. Make some compelling art, and the opportunities will probably find you. And if you think your art is compelling enough and you're moving on to the next thing, you're not. I just don't think your art's compelling. And just today, at 20 years in this business, I don't think that my art is compelling enough. I feel like if I keep leaning in on trying to make the best art that I can, all those opportunities are gonna line up and find themselves in a certain way. Every artist I talk to, with the exception of people who went through the like American Idol system, no slant to that, but that's kind of an obvious, like this step leads to this step leads to this step. Everyone else, their story is completely wacky. There's always a Gavin's Bladder story in there somewhere. There's some weird moment that happened where somebody heard something and played it for the niece of the this and the that, and it found its way. Again, because it was like compelling art. And especially in this age of social media and YouTube, like people are gonna hear your music. The opportunities for people to hear your music are going to be so obvious that you just probably, if you haven't gotten any calls, you're making shitty music.
It's exactly right. Exactly right. I just was thinking of this story. I remember my basketball coach in college taking the first day of post-training camp, taking this huge jar of marbles and tossing. The jar was about 3/4 full. And he took another jar, and they were all bigger marbles. They were the biggest marbles of the bunch, and he tossed them in at the top. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm telling this wrong because it's been a long time. Trust me, a long time since college, David.
No, that's right. Small marbles at the bottom, big marbles at the top didn't fit in.
No, the big marbles were at the bottom.
Okay.
He put all the big marbles in at the bottom, then he threw a bunch of small marbles at the side, and he sat there and he started talking to us about paying the price,
right?
Making sure that you're not cutting corners. If you're doing it right, you're eventually going to get rewarded. And he's shaking this huge mason jar of marbles. And after about 5 minutes of shaking, which is extremely irritating,
not bad,
he opens up the jar and all the big marbles are at the top, which is very counterintuitive given that they're bigger.
Right.
And I still, to this day, if Neil deGrasse Tyson could just give us a call later and tell us why that happens. I don't know why it happens. I mean, maybe he was our basketball coach was David Blaine of Upland, Indiana. I don't know. But his point was, if you're doing it correctly, if you're doing it well, it'll show itself. And if you do it well one time, it might not. But if you keep doing it well, because I think a lot of artists would maybe say, no, I wrote this really great song this one time and it never gets it. Well, yeah, but you might have to write 50 to get that 51st one heard. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because it didn't get seen that one time. If you keep doing that, if you're a compelling enough guitar player, songwriter, artist, eventually you're going to see some results. Now, then it comes down to how do you quantify results, and then that's a different discussion. But I think what you're saying is exactly right. It's just you inside out, I guess, is maybe a good way to put it. Focus on the quality of it. your record was compelling enough to where it had the shot at having a random occurrence, Gavin's bladder experience, right? Yeah.
When we were finished making the Evanescence record, actually, this is a lie. We were Bring Me to Life, the big single off of that record, we recorded first because it was going to be on a soundtrack. And so we recorded all of that song, drums, guitars, vocals, pianos, strings, all of it first. And then we went back and recorded the rest of the album. But we had finished recording Bring Me to Life. It was I think, mixed version of the song. And we were at there was like some kind of barbecue on the parking lot of the studio that we were working in Burbank. And so all the bands and artists and engineers and producers and whatever were all just kind of hanging out, having a hot dog outside. And Tony Ferguson, I think that's the right name. He was like a legendary A&R guy for Interscope. He found No Doubt and a handful of other like really influential, important bands. And Evanescence and No Doubt are not similar, but No Doubt was kind of the last version of a female-fronted rock band that you could connect to. And you know this early game that you do of like, you're trying to connect the dots of like, how do I fit in the lineage of commercial music? And it's like, are they more Linkin Park? Is it more this? I mean, it was kind of in between some of that stuff. But this guy happened to be at this barbecue, and Dave Fortman, the guy that was producing our record, was like, hey man, you mind if I play you a song? And he was not stoked about the idea of this, but it kind of was cornered. He was like, sure. So we go into the studio, and I remember Tony was sitting at the desk, and Dave was sitting right next to him, and we're all really, really proud of this song. And I think Bring Me to Life, maybe more than any other song that we wrote on that album, was Frankenstein together. We had those verses for a really long time. The chorus took a long time to get there. The label wanted us to put a rapper. Actually, the label wanted us to have a rapper in the band, but if as a compromise, they put a rapper on that song. So there's just the iterations of what Bring Me to Life ended up becoming had changed 20 different times along the way. So, and with the process of music, like you don't hear it for the first time anymore. So I'm hearing all those different iterations in my brain as it goes. And I think we're really proud of it, but we're not really sure what it would be like to hear it for the first time. Mm-hmm. He sits down, and there's a lot of people in there, probably 12 people in the room or so, engineers and seconds, and Ben and Amy and I happen to be like standing in there kind of in the back corner. And Dave hits play, and we listen down to the song, and it's the Dave Campbell strings and the spooky piano part. And listening back now, that song is a bona fide hit fucking song. There's no way around it.
Right.
But at the time, we were just three little kids from Arkansas that were like kind of excited about this thing that we made and hoping that we, may be able to be successful enough to maybe have a second album or pay our mortgage or pay our rent. Song finishes, and Tony, the first thing he said was, "That is not a hit song." He said this to Dave Portman, not like it's not my cup of tea, but like that song will not succeed.
Whoa.
And he says this to Dave, and I don't know if he recognized that we were in the room. Ben and I just looked like any other like dude engineer in the room, but like Amy being in there, I think would have like stood out a little bit to him. But he was like, "That's not a hit song. That song's not going to work." And Dave was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, yeah. I don't know if he said that song's terrible, but he was like, "No, that song's not going to work." And he just walked out of the room. And it really affected us. We were like, well, he's a professional. He knows. Clearly, he doesn't know, because no A&R guy I've ever met actually really knows. And you and I don't really even know. We know a little bit more because we're closer to it, because we're like in the roots of it. We're helping to make these things happen. But no one really knows. But it's funny how we lean on that, like, that professional opinion.
Right.
And the professional opinion matters, because sometimes those are the guys who have the ability to hit the button, the green light button or not.
Sure.
Fortunately, he didn't have the green light button for our career, but man, it was, we were just convinced that he was right, because he seemed so serious. He seemed like so convincing in the way that he said it.
Like you just assumed that there was this empirical on or off switch. Yeah. It's good or it's not.
Ugh.
Every good A&R guy, every legendary A&R guy that has had his ass kicked, here and there, and has been humbled. Always has a story like that.
Oh yeah.
You know, I passed on Pink. I remember hanging with Michael Goldstone, who's a legend. He signed Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine. And I remember sitting in a meeting with Michael, and he took me over. He's like, "Hey, I want you to meet Peter Mensch and Cliff Bernstein over at Q Prime." And I was in New York City at the time. And so we went and sat down with those two guys, and they were talking about how they passed on Rage Against the Machine. and Goldie brought Rage Against the Machine to Peter and Cliff. And Peter actually looked at me during the meeting and goes, "Yeah, we just weren't convinced that Rage could rage in 10 years, that they could keep raging. So we just said, go, we don't get it, Goldie." And so, I mean, anybody who's worth their salt understands, has been, I guess maybe a better way to put it is, we've all been humbled by the subjectivity of music and the spiritual nature of it. The fact that you don't always know why you turn around in the Ryman and people are crying.
Yeah.
You know, you don't, I mean, there's some ways, you mentioned Max Martin, that music can be quantified. I remember getting drunk with Ross Golan in New York City at an Atlantic Records writing camp, and we debated this for 2 hours.
Nice.
If we had a recording of that, it would be all bullshit. But like,
no, 4 minutes of it would have been magic, but it went spread out through. Yeah.
And Ross was arguing that it was empirical.
Yeah.
And I was arguing that it's spiritual and magical, and that there's this shapes and feelings in music that you don't know why it's compelling sometimes.
Right.
And the reality is both of us believe both sides.
Oh yeah.
And we're enjoying getting drunk and arguing.
Yeah.
But and
Max is both. I think that you can't be, there is a certain type of Max sound, but he really has like 20 sounds, 20 number one, like international number one smash sounds. But there's a certain type of like, in that, especially in the early days of that, like Backstreet Boys Swedish construction of a melody thing, that we go, oh yeah, that's his like empirical thing.
Yeah.
But he's so wickedly talented and so devoted to the craft of it that there's so many times I'll hear a great song on the radio. I'll go, who in the world wrote that song? It's like, oh, he did it again.
Yeah, it's him. You know, but at the core of that, and I remember talking to a buddy of mine who was in a hip hop camp, and they went and wrote with Max for a week, and he was talking about how empirically they break it down into tempos. And subject matter, and they will literally chart number one songs and they'll say, okay, you cannot write a song at 97 BPM and have it be a number one, because there's never been a number one song at 97, right? So he was talking about the insane degrees to which they're breaking this down.
That's wild.
That said, nobody can ever convince me that the reason why Max Martin isn't huge or is huge is not because he can write an insane melody. And that insane melody, sure, you might be able to empirically break that down in the same way that you can look at Michael Jordan's jump shot.
Right.
And you can look at the angle of his wrist, and you can look at his follow through, and you can look at the elevation. You can break that down. Michael Jordan's not thinking about that when he shoots that shot. And Max Martin's melodies from the beginning of time have been compelling. They're compelling. When you hear them, they're just easy to sing. They're emotional. So I don't know. I think he might get a rap for being this empirical Swedish writer, but at the beginning of that, or at the core of that, to me, is this: I feel emotion, whether it's a Backstreet Boys melody or whatever. You feel emotion, even if you think it's a shitty track or cheesy. Right, you're going to sing that thing. Yeah, you know. And so I think that still goes back to the painting on the wall. There's this intangible electricity or resonance that's coming out of this that still connects to real, authentic music. Yeah, there's something. Again, I love learning more about the math of it, but it really only lays a foundation. I feel like good math is like I'm just trying to make a canvas
and an environment where where inspiration can turn into great art. I still think it needs to be injected with that inspiration or that true story from a person for the art to be compelling. But when you come into my studio, I'm going to have the tools ready for us to make a great painting, as opposed to somebody else who who is writing in a tiny soulless room at a certain place and has a 1 octave MIDI controller that they're doing their pianos with. Like, it's worth it to me to create the right environment, to have instruments that you can pick up, that I'm allowing the chance of wherever this art is going to take us, that I can hopefully help you go into that place as well as possible. Right. But still, it's going to need the real animus of like a human experience that's going to fill in that space to make it real. Yeah. And I don't know what it is every time. I do love that every session that I walk into, I'm 15 minutes before any session, I'm pretty nervous because
right.
I don't know. Right. I don't know what we're going to do.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary.
It's a pretty wild ride.
I love the nervousness of it because it is proportional to the elation that you feel when you actually get something. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact that you're sitting there at the beginning of a session going, how are we going to start this?
Yeah.
Do we have any idea to hang our hat on? And then at the end of the session, when you listen back and it's typically, like you said, at least above a 5 or 6.
Yeah.
The spirituality of that creation is pretty awesome.
Because there truly is no ceiling on it. We could write a song today that makes each of us $20 million and becomes part of the zeitgeist of culture forever. There's no reason that wouldn't be the case. Right. Now, I've never done that, but today could be the day that we do that. That's a pretty rad job that could be the next thing.
Right. We're the biggest gamblers on the face of the planet. Hey, folks, one more shout out to our sponsor for the podcast, Love Justice International. Love Justice started 20 years ago when 6 college students decided that they would go to Kathmandu, Nepal, play soccer in the streets, get to know the kids of the city. And in the course of doing this, they really fell in love with Nepal, but also became aware of the scourge that really inflicts not just Nepal, but the surrounding region, and that is human trafficking. So as a result of seeing this, they tried to figure out what they could do and started the organization originally called Tiny Hands and now renamed as Love Justice International. One of the other reasons why this is very near to my heart and why I'm so closely connected to it is one of those 6 college students was my little brother. And as a result, I really got to watch them over the years and how passionate and devoted they are to this cause. But not just that, but how effectively and efficiently they administer the aid and the help towards eradicating slavery in the area. So I can't emphasize this enough. Go to the website, lovejustice.ngo. For just a few bucks a month, you can prevent a child from being trafficked or enslaved. It's that easy. So lovejustice.ngo. That's lovejustice.ngo. Thank you. We were just talking about the valleys and the high points. David, you were talking about on the break that your career is not just linear, but it is seasonal ups and downs with some valleys, with some high points. And we were talking about the fact that something about that is rewarding maybe for the 4 and the 8.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly creating the next battle.
Right.
Whereas linear it's hard to summon that competitive fire when it's linear. At least for me, the maintenance side is where I get a little lost.
Well, and I think, first of all, linear amounts of success in a highly creative field is probably impossible. But the only person that could pull that off is someone who isn't taking risks. Right. I think to be a successful songwriter over the course of decades is freakishly hard. To be a successful producer over the course of the decades is impossible, because the producer thing is it's defined by a sound, and then people start to pay you a ton of money for a certain sound. And I do that sound better than everyone else because I'm the one who invented whatever that sound is. But that sound is going to get tired by the very nature of the moving target of pop music. The coolest thing today is the least cool thing tomorrow. So we're going to move away from that sound. And if this producer is we used to get paid $500 a track for this sound, and now people are paying him $500,000 a track for this sound. Of course he's going to continue to do that thing. And then he's going to sound so tired because the rest of us are chasing the next thing because we can't get paid that kind of money for that thing. We can't do that thing as well as he does. So the rest of us are chasing whatever the next thing is. And he's stuck in that world. And then, I mean, and you see it, if you follow pop music over the last 50 years, the hottest guy of a moment, you don't even know his name anymore 5 years later, 10 years later. And I think it's hard for songwriters too. But the up and down of that thing, I don't know. It's proved to me that it's like, I've always just, Evanescence was successful enough early enough in my career that I've just continued to be rewarded being dumb enough to think that the moment in the room writing the song is the only thing that matters. And then we walk away from it. It's like, man, I love that song. And then the artist goes, I think we're going to put it on the record. I'm like, sweet. I'm not stoked about it, but I didn't write it to go on your record. I didn't write it to be a single of yours. I didn't write it for the label to put all this money to make that single the number one song. I'm really happy about all those things, but we wrote it so the three of us could listen back to this piece of art that we made that didn't exist before, and then all the other stuff becomes gravy. And that's not a line. It is a real way that I think about art. And so then when I look back over the course of now 19 years since Evanescence got signed, and the peaks and valleys of it, I don't know. I was writing good shit the whole time. I was writing terrible stuff the whole time too. But I was excited about the art, every version of that thing. When Ben Rector and I wrote Brand New, and that song ended up being like a big charting BMI award-winning pop song. Ben Rector's an indie artist that I completely love. I mean, man, I could listen to his music all the time. But we weren't writing that day because it's like, let's try to beat out a Selena Gomez song on the radio. Like, that didn't even seem to be an option. We were just making the art that we wanted to make. And then you look back and it's like, oh, wow, most of this is a failure. But some of this actually really worked along the way. Yeah. Because I'm not looking at, I know a handful of guys here in town who have said, I looked over how I would write songs over the course of a year, and I never wrote a good song on a Thursday. So I don't write on Thursdays anymore.
Oh, like, my goodness.
I don't know how that works. I think it's Craig Wiseman that told me that he doesn't write in the summers because he never wrote a good song in the summer, so he takes summers off. He's a legend. He can do whatever he wants. And I'll tip my hat to it. But in the moment, like, I don't know, the things are going to happen as they're going to happen in the moment. And whether I write better songs on Tuesdays or Thursdays, I'm not sure what that actually means. So I don't think you look back and you can project whatever happened in the last 10 years, project to the next 10 years for you. But it is funny to look back and go, oh yeah, every couple of years I had a song that was close on the radio or around this season, or I was building up towards a certain thing, or as it all starts to wear down, and I don't think there's anything else coming up, then something else will kind of sneak up. I couldn't have written that story out, but it just has kind of happened that way.
It's almost like, at least for a certain type of personality, you're an 8, I'm a 4, at least for certain types of personalities, you almost have to create fights for yourself. You have to, I mean, I realized that about my musical career. You kind of back yourself into a corner so that you can fight.
Yeah.
And you start to realize with age, oh, I'm kind of doing that subconsciously on purpose.
Right.
So I can have something to fight for.
I like that.
You know, I mean, it's kind
of cool.
Because then you always see the results at that point when you hit the bottom, or you're actually facing certain fears or feelings, or and then it kind of, it wells up those fighter things or those competitive things or those artistic pieces that you have to all of a sudden draw on.
Yeah.
Almost out of, it's our musical version of the reptilian mode.
Yeah, I bet.
Where you have to draw on real stuff.
And we almost fabricate, whatever the adversary would be, or, I mean, so every year I try to put out an album of music for me as an artist. And I mainly do it because I just feel like I write 100 songs a year. And if I'm lucky, maybe 10 of those songs end up getting cut. But there's at least another 10 songs that I really love from that year that for whatever reason just don't find their way. And I want the art to be out in the universe. Mm-hmm. But what I love, so I've made 5 volumes of a thing I call the December Sessions. And the December Sessions has a specific set of rules to it that I can't use. I have to use instruments that have to be mic'd. And so that becomes kind of the sound of the December Sessions. And then I did this other project where I couldn't use anything that was a mic'd instrument, or I had to do everything I only had these 3 instruments that I could use to build the whole project. Kind of like the stuff you were talking about in your early days with like, you've got this keyboard and you've got to build everything around this keyboard.
Limitations.
When we create those limitations, it stretches our brain to make art that we wouldn't normally reach for. And man, I think that stuff can be really profound. If nothing else, it increases the capacity of the sandbox that I feel like I can play in. Even if the art that I make in that experiment is bullshit, I have an understanding of that keyboard, an understanding of that instrument, an understanding of how to raise the dynamic level from verse to chorus only using these instruments, because what I have to do is add, whatever the thing is, like it's bending my brain in ways that I'm not comfortable with, and that makes me bigger and better at whatever the thing that I'm doing. I think that stuff's really fun.
Yeah, what is it about that? Because that is for sure true. Something about making the palette, it's not the palette, making your tools smaller, or limiting your tools, making it smaller in an effort to get something bigger.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, limiting, we have so many options, especially now even with technology of our DAWs even, just like there's so many plugins, so many options that, God, I remember the first tracks I was making in college were on one keyboard. And I remember Kanye talking about this Insonic VFX that he would program all his beats and everything.
Oh, really?
On this one keyboard. I was like, mine wasn't an Insonic, but it was a Korg O1W. And I made records on a Korg O1W.
I love that.
Inside. And I just think, I could never do that shit now. I am way too soft for that. To take one keyboard and make a full album on one keyboard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something about, I feel like that concept might extrapolate out to every area of life.
I think so.
Right? The compressing in order to expand your view, or limiting, or what is it? What's that truth? It's something about limiting yourself or making it smaller, or that actually, maybe it's just trimming a bush. You trim a bush and you cut it down and it actually grows faster.
Our transcendence out of our mortal selves happens quicker when we have a more confined space to work in. Because I think the whole point of art is that we're reaching for the divine. And if the options available to me are huge, then I can probably stay in my natural conscious world. And if I create more and more limitations, usually we don't have to create the limitations. Usually the limitations exist.
They're
you can only sing an octave and a half.
Right.
You can only play in these keys, or whatever it is. I only have this amount of time. But when there's restraints on it, usually we don't ever make it out of that box, and it's boring. But when I can move to this place, all of a sudden my constraints, I've moved into the transcendent. I've moved out of myself, even if for a glimpse of a song. It's funny how many songs I listen back to that I've been a part of writing, that it's like, okay, I get the moves that I made in that verse. I get the moves that other person made. I like what this moment is, but that bridge, we didn't see that shit coming. And every time I listen, it really gets me. So it's not even that the completion of the art is the magic of it, but I think those constraints, like, they push us to, I don't know.
What if it takes things out of your hands and forces you to focus on what actually matters? Maybe our artistic mind doesn't like to be fractious.
Okay.
Going almost back to what you were talking about with the artist, you're trying to remove elements from their picture so they can stay focused. When we're in the studio, we've got all these keyboards and all these guitars and amps and different combos of plugins. Well, essentially, all that stuff is pulling us away from the central creative moment, which is, what are you trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
What's that melody? And the more your mind is engaged in art, the farther you away from the real deal.
Oh,
right?
cool.
Right.
Okay.
So in as much as my mind gets involved with the technical aspect, I've tried to always prevent myself from learning too much about what a compressor does. I want to know what it sounds like.
Right.
And I want to know what it sounds like to boost 9 dB at 2K.
Right.
But I don't want to know why.
Okay.
I want to listen to my ear, because if I get too connected to that, I get away from, is it a good song? Is the melody good? What do I want to say here? What am I feeling today? Am I depressed? Right? So
Right.
maybe there's something to that. It's like, music isn't made with your mind. We can break it down empirically, like we after the fact. You can break down Michael Jordan's shot, but music and art should be made out of as close as you can get to like a true expression of the soul, right? That's the compelling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's the concept we're talking about. Just if you're limiting the pieces that are mind driven.
It whatever it is, it's forcing you out of the comfortable. Okay, so a metaphor people use with psychedelics is that psilocybin or mescaline or other psychedelics see this, your mind is like a mountain, a snowy mountain that people ski on, and you have, over time, you've created these ruts down the mountain of, when I think about my dad, or when I think about God, or when I think about a door, when I think about anything, these synapses in my brain have made these lines that connect from one space to the next. And they may be incredibly efficient for me, and they may be completely correct, whatever that would be. But when your brain is washed over with some psychedelic chemical, that it resets, not the mountain, but it's like a fresh coat of snow, and you have the chance to reset those lines that you connect it with. And I having done mushrooms a handful of times, that is really what it feels like to me, is that it allows me a chance to see it in a different way. And I can still do the exact same pattern that I had before. I can still get back to that place in the same way that I had before, but I don't have to anymore. Where like these ruts on the mountain, they're, especially if they've been in our brains for most of our lives, they're so deep now that it takes so much work to try to get out of whatever that rut is when I'm going to that place.
Right.
And so if I know G shapes on a guitar, it's really hard for me to use my brain to use A shapes to get around or whatever, just because I'm so used to how these G shapes feel in this space. So if I'm switching, if my limitation is my go-to would be to fill in this space, whether it's a bass guitar or an 808 or a Korg or whatever, if I have to use a different instrument to do that thing, I'm forcing my brain to find another pattern to get to the same place. Because I know this low end root of the chord frequency response needs to happen in the song, but I've got to use a different thing to get to it. And sometimes it's bullshit, but sometimes it's really transcendent. A buddy
jolts you out of that. Yeah.
A buddy of mine, actually Jeremy, who you met the other day, he's convinced, he's like, all great art exists with limitation. And his point that he always goes back to, he's like, Johnny Cash, his limitation was that, people didn't like him or didn't like his style of music or didn't believe in the thing that he was doing. And the limitation was like fighting against these expectations against him. And he builds this career for himself that's kind of different than everyone else around him. But the moment that he became accepted, the moment that he became really successful with it, I think a lot of people could argue the art suffered from it. It's like once you're on top, like, I don't know, what's the next thing to do? Maybe recording an album in a prison is part of that experiment, that limitation experiment. We don't hear a ton from him for a while. And then, like, you know, months before he dies, he makes an album that, I don't know, to me is like his most transcendent work. And when he is barely getting breath in his lungs and singing this song that Trent Reznor had written that sounds completely different as a Nine Inch Nails song, but Johnny Cash makes it his own. The limitation is his physical body. He can't sing like he used to sing. And we hear that and we connect to that. Because again, I think it's like he's pushing outside of, pushing to the very edge of his capacity of what he can be. And his capacity was in his probably 30s and 40s was really great. But that's not really what we wanted. As a man became frail and older and smaller in life, him pushing against the edges of that thing, that's when, we saw the magic of it again.
Right, his limitation or his way. You could hear the authenticity because he was almost, like you said, struggling to eke out. I remember seeing Burt Bacharach at the Skirmer Horn.
Oh, really?
And it felt like that. Like, I mean, he's still kicking. He's still doing it. Daniel Tashin just did a beautiful piece with him.
Oh, cool.
The other day. Actually, he's been working with him a good bit, evidently. But I remember seeing Burt, who I used to love how he wrote songs. I mean, he was a hero. And hearing him up on that piano when he's an old dude at that point, man. And he was just eking out these tones, but to these hit songs. Yeah. These hit songs that have been done by like heavy metal bands and stuff. I mean, this guy had written stuff for like 80s hair bands.
Oh, I had no idea.
He was singing this stuff at the piano, stuff he had written on the piano that had ended up being hair band hits. And I'm like, now that's how you really write a hit song. If you could write it at the piano, you're Burt Bacharach, and that was a rock hit.
Man,
that's how you know it's you're a great song.
That's pretty amazing. I love that.
But yeah, that is, you're right. There's something about the limitations. You know, jumping back to something you said earlier about artists with the trappings, getting too involved in kind of all the trappings instead of focusing on you know, for an artist, the live performance. I always think of Johnny Cash with the live performance. I always say to artists, if you can't hold a crowd, if you can't hold their attention with a guitar or a piano, just you yourself, keep working.
Yeah.
Because you should be, and we've all been there. We've been in a club where multiple artists getting up and all of a sudden somebody gets up and everybody's talking and doing their thing. Somebody gets up and they just play a song and everybody stops. And you're like, okay, that's what you're shooting for.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times artists these days, there's so many things they have to be responsible for that they aren't going back to that kind of the nexus of everything that it means to be an artist, which is, can you hold the attention of a crowd?
Yeah.
You know,
thinking about like writing rounds. So I've done a good number of shows with me and Emerson Hart and David Ryan Harris. And I'm a good singer, but both of those guys are fantastic singers. And I watch how, again, the three of us just with acoustic guitars. Me and a couple of buddies have been for the last 3 months training in jiu-jitsu. And the guy that's like, who knows it better than the rest of us, well, he's probably like 30 or 40 pounds less than I do. And we're not matched now. He's still better than I am, but he's taught me enough to where it's starting to even out a little bit. But I see all these moments where I'm like muscling my way through just because I'm bigger, because I'm heavier or have a little bit more muscle mass. But you see with him, it's like, it's all the technique that's getting him through everything. And so because of that, he's a lot better at it than I am. And I'm Like I want to get to the point that I don't have to use weight or strength to make things happen, because especially with jujitsu, that's kind of the whole point of it. Mm-hmm. In the same way, when we do these writer rounds together, I'll win over an audience, but I win over an audience because I'm singing songs to them that I've written that they've heard before. And that's kind of a cheap move. It's like being 30 pounds heavier. Like, but watching DRH, he owns a crowd. He can sing a handful of songs that people have never heard before. And it is the power of the performance that really does it. And he's an artist. I mean, that is such a delineating part of it between the two of us. It's like, I can sell a song that you've heard before and you'll like it. And it'll be interesting to you because you've never heard a guy sing it because it was a female vocalist before or whatever else.
Well, it's a great song.
Well, and hopefully the construction of the song does the thing. But to watch a real performer, a real artist own that space without the crutch of a melody that they're going to be singing along to, it's a very different and cool kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we broke, you said, riddle me this. Hit me.
Okay, so you and I may not see this the same way, and that's fine.
We're still looking for that thing, so let's go. Maybe this is it.
So I've had this with a couple of folks before. You and I have written 5 times, maybe less than that actually, 4 or 5 times together. And I don't think we've written a good song together yet. I don't think we haven't written a bad song. We haven't written a great song together yet. But there's a thing, like from the first time that we wrote, I know that we have great songs in us, but maybe it's just a competency of like your capacity as a producer and as your understanding of chords and structure like that. Maybe that's the thing that I see in it. But it's interesting to me that like a lot of times early writers, if they write a really good song with someone, they go, oh, we're really great collaborators together. And they may write another 10 songs together and they may all be garbage, but they just happen to get lucky with one. Reverse being the same, where it's like they write together, it doesn't go super great. Oh, we're not really great collaborators together. Every once in a while, I've had this dynamic where it's like I write with someone and the session is fine and the vibe is cool, but the song isn't really great. But I know somewhere in my brain that it's like, oh, we have great songs ahead of us. We just haven't tapped into them yet. Mm-hmm. But I can't quantify. I mean, maybe you think the songs we've written are great, or maybe you think we'll never write great songs. But I have this sense that it's like, even though we haven't tapped into the thing yet, I know, not just because of our friendship, but I know there's a musical dynamic where it's like, if we get the right, in the right moment, chasing in the right direction, it'll find the thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that too is just if you're doing the right thing, if the variables are there, then eventually the product comes. You know, and in our world, like you said, you write a lot of 5s, 6s, and 7s. We don't write much less than 6s anymore.
Right.
But to get that 9 or 10 is a rare occurrence. But anytime you get a 9 or 10, there are certain variables in place that are always there. You're usually with someone who gets it.
Yeah.
They gets it. There aren't encumbrances in the room by them not being as quick, melodies firing off each other that you're not building off each other, but you're kind of bouncing off each other. I mean, you know, that's the thing. I love when you sing a melody and somebody tweaks it and then somebody else tweaks it, and then you say a vowel or word, and that, you know, and you're just kind of building. And then there are other moments where it just seems like it's kind of these rigid edges in the room, just boom, boom. It's not popping fluidly. So maybe it's just the fact that, I feel the same way. It's like I know people that I know if we're in a room together, we're going to always get good stuff. Not always, but it's going to come, because I think there's I think there's just a level of I don't know how to say it. There's a level of acumen that you can get to, that you have confidence enough to know if the variables are right, if the environment is right, if there's a vibe with another person, then there's not going to be an issue getting great stuff. I don't know.
With publishers, it's funny too, because I think publishers aren't in the room, so they only hear the song. And it almost happens to me more the other way around, where it's like a great song comes out of a session, and my publisher's like, you should definitely get in with him again. It's like, no, I'm never writing with that person again.
Right.
But you guys got a great song. It's like, yeah, but, and not even that, like, I think I wrote most of it. It's just like, I know that we happen to get lucky in this moment. And I know enough of the, like, the psychology or the skill set dynamic that we just got really lucky on this one. And we'll write another 10 songs and they'll all be garbage.
Right.
And some people, I think, it's not just about songwriting, it's about collaborating. It is a costly process. A, we don't get paid anything for it unless it succeeds. And B, every session that I go into, for me to give it a chance of success, I have to lean in so much to it. Maybe I'm not physically tired at the end of a session, but I'm always like spent at the end of a session because you gotta lean in and push the whole time to be available for those moments to make it really work. But I love that, like, turning in a song, and the publisher or whoever is like, that song's really not great. I'm like, I know it's not great, but I know I can write a great song with that person. I know that we're on our way to finding something really special. Like, are you sure? And we may write another song, and it's like, I know that we're not there yet, but I know that there's something built in there. I just feel like that's a pretty rare thing I'm trying to think of other examples of it.
Well, and David, a lot of it, I totally 100% agree.
I think it's kind of funny, though.
I think a lot of it, too, has to do with the artist. I mean, you and I are used to shape-shifting into that artist in the room. Like, what are they trying to say? Which, going back to you making the transition from...
I thought we weren't going to talk about my transition.
I slipped. So sorry.
There was one thing.
I was trying so hard. It's like when somebody says, "Don't look at this. Don't look at this. Don't look at this," and you're like, "God damn, I looked at it."
Exactly. I grew up Southern Baptist. I know that very well. Yeah. Everything in my life was that, I feel like.
Guard your eyes, David. Guard your eyes. Put that Bible in the middle of your seat.
Oh, that's good.
God, remember that? Yeah, you'll when you go out on a date, just put a Bible in between the two of you. And you'll
that's
never cross
good.
it.
Ooh, that's good.
Goodness sakes. But I think a lot of it is when you're being informed by the artist a lot. That's kind of that's the conduit, you know.
Yeah.
So if you and I are in the room with a subpar artist, and we know we're trying to write a song for that artist, but if that artist can't pull it off, if you know, it's almost like you need stuff to work with from an artist. You know who they are, and so if that's a benign piece in the room, then sometimes that can hurt too.
Yeah.
So
and some days it just doesn't click. I mean, actually, many days it just doesn't really. Again, the magic is a thing that's really hard to quantify. That can create a skill set to set the stage. That if magic does sneak up on us, we can make the most of it. But that's very different than like conjuring the magic itself.
Right.
But I was wondering if your perception of it was similar, just in that, like, I think Jordan Reynolds and I think early days, like, had a couple of not great songs early on, but I was like, I know that we can write really good songs together. And that's an exciting side of it too, because it may take 10 songs, it may take 3 songs, but I know it's going to happen. And I think that's the journey to get to that's really fun.
Yeah. And you're right. Given the amount of amazing writers in Nashville, it is a kind of a rare feeling to get in the room with someone that you know, hey, if we do this enough, we're going to get a lot of good stuff. There's just so many variables, so many dynamics, so many musical tastes, where you go, where you move, how you like the rhythm of how you write. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
That's kind of funny though. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
I have strong opinions about all things, so I'm ready for it.
I think about this a lot. I think you and I have actually talked about this a little bit, but not specifically. Time machine. You have a time machine. Given how, I would say, the music business and how we write songs, how we create songs, the process, the way songs get out there. the monetization of songs. It's changed more in the last 10 years than probably in 100. Just with the streaming piece and
it really is the digital piece.
Yeah,
because it's the non-physical thing that
Right.
has changed it the most.
Right.
But streaming being the next,
Right.
the second phase. Yeah.
And you've heard that kind of the picture of technology it's not linear. It doesn't gradiate naturally. It actually is a parabolic.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when you start hitting that.
It feels like we're in that hockey.
Yeah. So
hockey stick of it,
that
yeah.
said, you got a time machine, and I shoot you 20 years into the future with regard to music, how it's created, how it looks. What do you think?
In the 1980s, Mutt Lange could do something that none of us could do. He could hear like the pitch and the timing of something on that. Let's say like the pitch is the y-axis and the timing is the x-axis. His brain could zero in on something in a way that the rest of us could not. And because of that, the stuff that he produced, I think especially Def Leppard, but everything that he did, all AC/DC and Bryan Adams and Def Leppard, all that stuff was awesome in a way that no one else could do it. And then Pro Tools came along and essentially did what made him great. And it's not that his sound or his expertise became outdated. It just meant that we had tools to do that thing. His genius was not limited to, but very focused in a technological way of thinking about art. In the same ways that a great guitar player, a great drummer, a great keyboard player, and even a great vocalist, you couldn't get a record deal in the 70s and 80s unless you were a fantastic singer.
Right.
And now you don't have to be a fantastic singer. And I know a lot of people who bemoan that, and I honestly don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. I like where we are now because where we are now focuses more on the authenticity of the story and the performance. And my guess is the line from now until 20 years from now is just going to extrapolate that thing more. Mm-hmm. Now, I get that this is a self-serving version of the future because I've never cared about being a great piano player. I've never cared about being a great singer. It's funny, in the studio now when I'm singing on stuff, my piano playing is so much worse now than it was 20 years ago. But I'm so much better of a piano player in the studio now than I was 20 years ago. Right. When we did that opening piano sequence to Bring Me to Life, we played it on 4 different pianos and 4 different studios. That was more Dave Fortman's thing of just trying to get a different sound. But my rhythm was fine, but the velocity of how I would hit the notes was so unbalanced then because I could technically move around really well on the keyboard, but I didn't have a great feel for the instrument. And my feel for the instrument is a lot better now, but my rudimentary skills are a lot less. When I sing on stuff now, I sing a lot more above or below the pitch than I used to, but I think I'm a better singer now because I'm leaning into, because I know what the technology can do for me. So I'm not caring so much about the pitch of it. I'm not going to be, more than 30 cents off, but I'm not focused so much on the pitch because I know the pitch can be covered by another thing. I'm focusing more on my delivery of it and trying to lean into whatever that side of it is. And that's what I think music is going to continue to turn towards. There's certain parts of the artistic expression that isn't about ones and zeros. And that's the stuff that's going to become really, really special. And everything that can be quantified will be quantified. Guitars are harder to fake than pianos or drums, but we'll learn how to fake all that stuff. Which makes me honestly really stoked, because that means that the things that, at least to me, really matter about music are the things that we'll lean into more and more and more. Madonna was unbelievable in the fact that she's never been a good singer, and she made a cottage industry out, not cottage, an international industry out of almost this like Andy Warhol performative art experience. But she was probably one of the few artists on the radio in the 80s and 90s who was actually not a very good singer. Like, so much, you had to technically be able to do that thing, and there's only so many people that could do that. Now, most people on the radio aren't great singers, but I don't feel bad about that, because I think they're focusing more of their attention on this human element of it. Yeah, let me pitch and time your vocal, and then it'll sound amazing. And that's kind of what we want. Because again, probably because my brain isn't about the on stage piece of it. If an artist can sell it on stage or not doesn't really matter to me. The recording, to me, is the ultimate expression of commercial music now. So whatever it takes to get to that place, we can get frustrated because I got to spend an extra hour and a half timing this artist's vocal in place. But when it's done, it sounds amazing. And that's the thing that kind of matters from it. So I think that we will get, my assumption is we'll get a lot lazier on a lot of technical aspects of music.
Because you can just dial them up.
Because you can just dial the thing in, and that's fine. But we'll hone in a lot more on the artistic feels too biased, but hone in on the more human aspects of why we're drawn to music in the first place, which I think is going to be awesome.
Yeah, hopefully what we want to say.
Yeah. And I'm also convinced too that on the ways that I think streaming is an inevitable piece of the future of music, and I in equal parts hate it and love it. I love the discovery component of streaming music, that I can text you a link to a song, and it doesn't. The only cost to you is time. And so we find out about new music and new artists in ways that we never would have before. And as a creator, that's a really special thing,
right? That
I'm making new art. Like, I don't love the concept of gatekeepers in general. And so if I've got all these gatekeepers that say, hey, these are the 9 female pop artists right now that people will listen to and they'll spend money on. And if you don't get on their albums, if you don't get in their camps, if you don't kiss their ass in the right way, if you don't do whatever to make this A&R guy happy to get in this space, then your songs won't be heard. I love that now it's so democratized that it's spread out to any independent artist can have a huge song right now, because streaming makes that possible, because the money flow of it already exists, that it's like, yeah, I don't need to buy a certain record to listen to a certain song. I can engage with music in any way that I can possibly. The tricky part about streaming is that I don't like albums people don't really make art for albums that much anymore, but I also don't love albums anymore because I'm not bound to the musical experience of an album in the ways that I used to be, that I'm in my car and I've got 3 CDs in here and I'm tired of listening to those 2. And so John Mayer, Born and Raised, is a great example to me. I had that CD in my car. I really wanted it to sound like Continuum, and it didn't. And I don't really care about Neil Young. And that was a lot of an influence for that record, but it was literally the CD in my car. I think he's a brilliant artist, and I'm excited to listen to his music as it comes out. But that happened to be the CD that was in my car, in the last car that I owned that had a CD player in it. And I don't know, I'm just driving around and I don't want to listen to the radio. So I listened to that record, and now Born and Raised is one of my favorite records because that's what music does. It wove itself into my story. Mm-hmm. And now those songs are part of my human experience. It weaves itself into my nostalgia. And I don't think streaming works like that, because the difference between a playlist and an album is just nomenclature now, where for us in the past, it had to do with what am I going to spend money on and what am I physically going to have in my possession in this moment. And I do love the hour-long music experience in a different way than I like the 3-minute song experience. I like them both, but man, the story you can tell in an hour, that's a pretty profound kind of thing.
You think that'll come back?
No.
Yeah, I think it's done forever.
I think it'll bifurcate.
Span.
There will be a specific type of audience and a specific type of artist that's always going to lean into that thing. Bon Iver is never going to be a singles artist.
Sure.
But it's going to be small, I think.
Yeah, it's just the attention span. Everything's just getting so fast. I remember talking to a video guy just about
as we sit on our 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We're trying to break the mold, slow it down. I mean, Flavatown Mike and I were talking about this the other day about how, is there any other time in your day that you're not looking at your cell phone?
Yeah, man.
I mean, the fact that we can sit in this podcast for 3 hours and I'm not looking at my cell phone one time is pretty weird.
It's pretty great. I mean, the only other time is when I'm writing, honestly.
Yeah, true. Although I've given in and I'm
really?
writing on my cell phone now. So
yeah.
Although over quarantine, I've kind of gone back to a notepad, but for the most part, I'm sitting on my cell phone looking at the notepad.
I put a landline, rotary phone, and a landline in my studio for the purpose of saving my marriage, because when I'm writing, it is my gift to the two people that I'm writing with, and their gift to me is our attention. And if you're always checking other stuff during a writing session, I don't care how talented you are, you're not here writing a song with us.
Right.
And there's extenuating circumstances or whatever else. But hours and hours would go by in a writing session, and I just wouldn't look at my phone. And Kate's like, I need you to respond to me on this stuff.
Yeah.
So we made this like bat phone that just for the sole purpose of Kate being able to, hey, if I really need you, I can call that line. And it's funny, she would call that line, I don't know, once every 4 months, but just having it there was like a helpful dynamic for us, because it's like I couldn't avoid that thing. But yeah, my phone becomes my enemy in a writing session just because I need to stay in whatever this stuff is.
That's how you get the good stuff.
I think so.
If you don't get on a roll, if I'm getting phone calls during I think that's why I've always worked so well at night. Just like my productive hours typically, and this is so not good for a constructive life across the board, but have been 9 to 2.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if you look at almost anything in my musical career that's been at all beneficial, good art, it typically happens from 9 to 2.
Yeah.
Now I've had to switch that, the Nashville model of writing from 11
to 4,
to 4, which I've gotten a lot better at. But yeah, you know what is crazy to me, David, is so I typically do my grocery shopping on Sunday nights.
That's weird.
Right. And as I'm walking through the aisles of Kroger, don't judge me, I don't go to Whole Foods. Okay. The playlist is the shit. First of all, it's the shittiest music, but it's like they pick the worst. I mean, a lot of 80s music is actually hook laden. Like hooks for days. Like you could not play a guitar part and if it wasn't a massive hook in the 80s. And even those melodies were just insane. Level 42 melodies or like Ambrosia or those.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the genre and the time period that they play in Kroger on Sunday evenings is so disgustingly horrible.
This is really specific.
I mean, it's bad. But what I always end up thinking, I listen to the lyrics, and they're so bad. And there's a lot of DX7s, which my first keyboard ever, and they're coming back around now. But a lot of DX7s, a lot of Luther Vandross. The lyrics, these are pop hits. We never could say any of this stuff. It would never pass the muster. It's a different nomenclature. And there's no session that I'm in that I could get away with saying the lyrics that they're saying. It's too basic. And it causes me to think the way that we're speaking in music and songs that's not that long ago. 20, 30 years ago, it has changed so much that you can't write a song with that nomenclature. I mean, what's that going to be in 20 years from now? Obviously, it's going to be significantly different. The way that we construct words, the words that sound good, the words that, the songs we're writing today, lyrics that we think are compelling. In 20, 30 years, is it possible that we'll listen to the way we're constructing sentences and will it be different, or is that a product of it being stylistically, the music that's playing on a Sunday night in Kroger being stylistically not extrapolated?
I don't think that's true. I think you're right. Those were big songs at the time. My guess is that some of it is just timely, because I think there's a lot of ignorant lyrics in music now, redundant lyrics in music now, but it just sounds cool to the moment. I used this in a song the other day, so I feel a little bit bad about it. But the phrase, "if I'm being honest," is such a ridiculous phrase to use in a song. It's like, well, what were we doing before this? Were we not being honest?
Hey, could I, for 1 second, stop being unauthentic for a second to say something? Give me a second to be unauthentic, to not be unauthentic.
But I remember the first time I heard, it may have been, I can't. It was like around that Chainsmokers Closer time that I remember I heard that phrase, "if I'm being honest," in a lyric of a pop song, and it seemed really fresh to me at the time. That's only, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It seemed really fresh to me at the time, but it's kind of ridiculous. It's a wasted phrase, but when you hear it, you're like, oh, he's going to be honest now. But in context, it's like, what does that mean to the rest of the things around it? But it just felt right in the time. It almost felt, and actually Chainsmokers Closer, I think, is a great example of like talking about a Range Rover, or talking about a specific city, or like there's this like proper noun thing that we do in lyric writing right now that gives this impression of authenticity that we hadn't done before right now.
Well, it pops you out of the moment in a good sense. It's like that's a word we're not supposed to use.
Right.
You're not supposed to say Range Rover.
Right.
So when they say it under the constructs of a really cool beat and a really cool melody, you're like, shit, that works.
Right. And I think in 20 years from now, we'll look back on that and we'll go, that's so dumb.
Right.
Or I never owned a Range Rover, so like, how am I supposed to relate to that? Now, I think that criticism isn't really helpful, but I get why people do that thing. So I think that every era has its own version of like genericness or kitschiness connected to the lyric. I will say also, there's a thing that happened in pop music in the 80s and 90s where they were maybe not melodically more complex than we are now, but they were chordally so much more complex than we are.
Yeah, we've lost all that. They could get away with, they could be creative in a way that we aren't really allowed. Hopefully it's coming back.
But I would contend it's more like we are focusing our creative energy in a different field because the whole song is going to be 4-1-6-5. We're not focusing our energy in the chordal space. We're focusing our energy in these like weird tricks of wordplay or whatever else. We're back to
limitations.
Yeah. So for them, it's maybe more generic lyrics, but these chords are changing underneath it in a way that's like really complex. Mm-hmm. And that solves that problem. I actually don't love, there's something about the simplicity of a 3 or 4 chord progression for a whole song. If you can keep me interested without hitting a crash cymbal and without changing the chord progression, you've written a fantastic song.
Sure.
Because those two, they're not gimmicks, but like those two mechanisms, the crash cymbal telling you this is a new section now, or the chord changes leading you to another place. Those are vehicles that we use to define dynamics and changes and stuff. So if you can just stay with 3 chords and you can tell the whole story that way. Like, man,
almost,
you've done really well. Those are the limitations that you've created some great art in that space.
It's almost like if you can serve me up a world-class meal on a paper plate and I still know it's a world-class meal, then hell, this is good food.
Yeah,
right?
no doubt. That's what that thing kind of feels like to me. So I actually really like that quarterly we've made a lot of music simpler now. It pushes us to be really good at the other thing.
Yeah, Steely Dan, goddamn cheaters. Cheaters.
Well, okay, how about this though? Actually, I really don't like Steely Dan. And I know that I'm supposed to, but like,
I was ruined, David. When I first moved to Nashville and I was touring, our front of house guy would tune the sound system.
Oh yeah,
to Steely Dan.
That's a perfect band to tune a sound system to. Yeah.
If I hear Steely Dan, that was my first introduction to Steely Dan. If I hear Steely Dan, I start shaking, smoke starts coming out of my ears. I wet myself, and
so I have a good buddy who would do front of house, and it was I can't remember the Steely Dan song. And then the next song he would play was Sting, If I Ever Lose My Faith in You, which I think is maybe the best recording of all time.
10 Summoner's Tales?
Yeah, it's on 10 Summoner's
right?
Tales. And there's something about... So the weird thing about like changing meter and changing chord progressions and moving in and out of a key is that those are stylistic things that people think are substance. But to me, substance is storytelling and performance. Again, where I think as technology for the next 20 years, they're gonna figure out all the style and ones and zero components. And the substance is always still gonna be storytelling and performance. Mm-hmm. And as we move closer to that makes me excited. Sting would write a song in 5/4 that you could sing along with. And I think that's the real trick to me. Yeah. He could, If I Ever Lose My Faith in You, drops down, I think like 4 steps
on the chorus.
In the chorus of the bridge. Who steps down for a section with modulations? That's so wild.
He modulates down on the downbeat of the chorus, correct?
Well, oh yes, you're right. It modulates down, I think, a whole step to the chorus, but then in the bridge, it modulates down like 4 steps to this lower down chorus, and then goes back to the original key again. But he does all this in a way that non-musical people keep singing along, and it just sounds beautiful. And I think, like Richard Marx, Right Here Waiting for You, fantastic melody, but it's right in the diatonic space that it's supposed to be in. It's following all of that like Austrian kind of Western music construction thing that it's supposed to do. It's 4/4. It stays in the key, and that's what we spend all our time doing. That's great. But then when you hear If I Ever Lose My Faith in You, and like that is doing all of these tricky moves, getting around it. I mean, even the opening of that song where it's like the major 7 and the minor 7, all that stuff is supposed to sound complicated, and Sting made it sound natural. That's, I think, where the magic of it lies. And I've honestly never heard another musician that can make weird shit sound normal. That's why I think it's great.
No, he takes jazz changes, and he somehow, I mean, even remember him bringing in Branford Marsalis on a pop album.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all over it. Like he's playing the shit, like he's literally just like shitting all over the song. And it's amazing. He's got just sax in every gap. Sax in every gap.
That is its own. I feel like if there is a bumper sticker for this podcast, sax in every gap.
Sax in every gap. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Sting took these things that were complicated, 7/4 or a song in 5, and he somehow made them palatable. I think about that with scientists who can let us into the beauty of scientific concepts or concepts that are beyond what we can conceptualize naturally. And they're brilliant at them. They know them, but they somehow find a way to articulate them in a way where we can be privy to this beauty that is science that is way above our pay grade.
That's awesome.
Sting somehow allowed, because of his incredible symbiosis between understanding of pop music and a great memorable song and chops for days. I mean, a guy who could sing like that and play fucking bass with his thumb,
right?
And still play those lines, play hooks on the bass while he's singing hooks. I mean, that's insane. But for him he's the scientist that is putting things into words in a language that the common man can experience, and thus elevates the acumen or the palate of the common man. Like people got to hear pop music because of Sting in a way, with musical concepts that even musos right can experience. And typically with pop music, you know, the Britney Spears and boy band days are the kind of the low level of that. Sorry for anybody out there who love boy bands, but that was kind of the low level. Sting was the high level of that, where he's taking concepts that shouldn't be able to be done in pop music, and he's somehow opening. I mean,
I think that's really cool.
That record. I mean,
that's the record, man. 10
Sumners, and even before that, Dream of Blue Turtles.
Dream of Blue Turtles was the first one. I think Soul Cage is the one right before 10 Sumners is equally as amazing. So the kid, the 17-year-old kid that has a modicum of talent that wants to make music, he goes out of his way to make simple things seem complicated. I think that's really what happens. Like, he plays acoustic guitar at the lunchroom, and he's trying to convince all of these, teenage girls that what he's doing is really complicated. Mm-hmm. And it's performative, and it's stylistic, and it's stupid to me. Sting being the opposite version of that, where it's like making the complex seem like you can. I mean, I think it's Eric Weinstein that said, like, the real genius is the one who takes complicated structures with maximum reduction and minimum distortion. And I think that's great teachers or artists in any capacity. I have a new intern that I'm working with at the studio, really starting with just the basics of Pro Tools and just audio for media, like what a sine wave is and what an overtone series is and all of that stuff. The complication of things can be really, really profound. But if I can do the maximal amount of compression, I can make it as small as I can with the minimal amount of distortion, that I'm not like actually twisting the form of it so much that you can't even tell what it is anymore. Like, that's really hard to do. And if you could do that right, that's a really helpful thing. And there's a version of Sting where it's like he was taking these really complicated things and we're just singing along like All This Time is an easy song to sing. And it's like, no, he made it feel that way for us, which is pretty dope.
Did you see the video in the castle? Do you remember that?
No.
The video of that, when they made 10 Sumner's Tales, they probably recreated it, but they went to his castle, evidently in England or whatever. Yeah. And
one of his castles.
Probably, yeah. And they filmed every song live with Vinny and David Sancious on keys, and what was it? Dominic was the.
I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's an amazing video, and it's they're just set up in one of his big castle-ish rooms. Let's set up in this turret.
Can you imagine the horrible things that have happened in that turret over the years?
Oh, geez.
I don't want to.
Yeah, no chains and. Yeah.
No one wins here.
Yeah. Huh. No. Mike, Flavatown. Yep. Well, shit, we did it.
I think we covered it all.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We could keep talking for the next 2 hours, but I think we've effectively talked for a few.
We've officially podcasted now.
Let's do it again, man.
I'd love it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you for coming on, and
let's
hopefully next time I see you, we'll be writing a song together.
We're going to write a great song this time.
A great song.
Or not. We'll find our way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Hey, and next time we talk, let's talk about your book.
Oh, man.
Next time you're on here, you're going to have a finished book.
Give
us the quick Cliff Notes of this. Well,
I'll give you the Cliff Notes of the journey of it for me. You write a song at 16 years old, and you have heard songs before, but it's uncharted territory. And the elation that I felt the first time I wrote a song transformed the person that I am and the trajectory that my life was going to take. And then the next song I wrote was better, and the next song that I wrote was better, and the next song that I wrote was better, and I learned more from it. And I think part of the part of the essence of the human experience is that toil is a necessary component of work. And I think when we die and we go to whatever the next thing is, I don't think we're going to have to do that anymore. But on this place, the better you become at something, somehow some of the joy of it goes away. Part of why I work with young producers and writers is to remind myself of the joy of the experience, because the more you do it, the more it's like, it just feels like, okay, now it's just another day clocking in at the office. And the medium of a novel seemed so out of my wheelhouse that I just wondered, like, I don't know, what would it look like if I spent a decade writing a book in my free time? And I put pen to paper and just started writing. And it's a fictional story. It's a dystopian, futuristic kind of story. It's not in any way, it's not like the life of a songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's been the most fun thing that I have done in my adult life, because it makes me a 16-year-old again writing a song. It's a medium that I don't know anything about. And so the exploration of it and the adventure of it and the blank page of it, and that we build a whole world, has been amazing. It's been really, really fun and really exciting. And the deeper I get into it, the more I realize, these mediums are not the same. 80,000 words is a very different thing than a 3-minute song.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
But it's fantastic. It's so fun to explore in that kind of space. It makes me want to delve into as many artistic expressions as possible. Not to the point of excellence. Excellence isn't the point to me. It really is like, I want my brain to continue to be in this uncharted lands. I want to continue to make new paths
tracks
in the snow.
Sure.
Because I think writing this book has made me a better songwriter over these last 10 years. Even if the book is complete and utter shit, it makes me a better songwriter in the process. And I do think I've devoted my life to songwriting, so it's worth whatever it takes to become a better songwriter, but also because that's the thing that I think I am kind of gifted for in this space, is to lean into it. But I think the book's really good. I could be wrong, but I think it's really good. So hopefully you'll read it soon.
Hey, next time you're on, I'm going to introduce you as a novelist.
Oh, I love that.
No, honestly, David, I tend to gravitate to people who cover a lot of distance in their life, not because they care about success, but because they care about taking risks, bleeding, sucking the marrow out of life, leaving it all on the table. Use your colloquialism. I don't care. Leaving it on the court and going hard. And the thing that I've noticed, I enjoyed prepping for this podcast because you're one of my close friends, but I got to find out things about the pattern of your life that we wouldn't find out drinking whiskey together on a Tuesday night. I love the distance you've covered, and it confirmed to me why I respect you, is because you can't cover that amount of distance without bleeding, without pushing, without challenging your boundaries,
right?
Without forcing yourself to be uncomfortable. There's just no way around it. And I always resonate with people who have forced themselves to be uncomfortable, gone through shit, and pressed the boundaries and bled. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, man. Keep doing what you're doing, and we are. I'm going to see you probably tomorrow. So
probably so. Yeah. Sounds good.
Honestly, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you, man. It was fun to be here.
Hey, thanks, folks, for listening. Love you. See ya. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. Once again, a big thank you to our sponsor for the podcast, Love Justice International. You can follow them on Instagram. It's at LoveJusticeINTL, or you can go to their website, lovejustice.ngo, and consider donating. Once again, that is lovejustice.ngo, lovejustice.ngo. Thank you.